What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope you guys are well. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the show if you will, so we can continue to bring you independent black male thought. And I'll have an announcement probably later this week where we will be taking that to a whole nother level. So keep listening out. Kind of took some time off in the last week, had to get some other work done. So we're trying to get back on track. And I thought, what would be the absolute best way I could do that? Well, I figured the one way I could do that is to bring on a good brother of mine who I am a fan of. And if you are not, you've definitely been missing out. But I figured it'd be one of the best ways to get back on track. So let me go ahead and welcome the Green Gorilla. How you doing, brother?
What's cracking? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
Cool.
Glad to have you in here, man. It's always good to rap with you.
Pleasure to be here with you, bro.
Man, shout out to MI Masters. Appreciate that support. Also, shout out to Joe Average Brother. He says I'm ready for your take on King Kong versus Bayang. Okay. Well, I'm just as excited to kind of go through it as I am to hear the good brother Green Gorilla's response as well. Make sure that you also subscribe to the Green Gorilla channel and support the brother over there. Shout out to AKs and Curtains for the support. Got a lot of brothers in the house. We're already over 172 viewing. We are just getting started. So again, hit the like button coming in, support the channel. You can do that in all kinds of ways. You can hit the super chat. You can hit the Venmo. You can hit the PayPal. You can hit the Patreon. Y'all know the deal, so please make sure you support so we can continue to develop and grow this. So, we know not too long ago, there was a very trippy situation. This came out September 8th on Fox Soul, and it was a debate of sorts where one Dr. Umar Johnson, one Cynthia G, one Hope Giselle, and a number of other people, one other brother actually, whose name escapes me at the moment, or at least really how to pronounce it, and I don't want to butcher it, but, they all showed up on this Tammy Mack show, where they talked about a number of issues as they pertain to black males. And it's interesting that they didn't invite anybody from, this sector of YouTube to do that. But I will say the conversation was quite revealing nonetheless. So let me go ahead and try and bring some of that discussion up in the only way I can without, hopefully without having the video taken down, as it were. But you did get a chance to check this out, didn't you, Green Gorilla?
Yeah, I saw it today. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, some people say I'm kind of low, though. I don't perceive myself as being low, but maybe...
Well, tiny bit, but we can hear you, though.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on to my other computer, and then I'll segue in that way. But needless to say, yes, I saw the video, and I'm not going to say I'm alarmed because that's the expectation with the usual suspects, especially Cynthia G. But right. what I was surprised about was Umar and some of the things that he said. And just it's proof positive that some of the things that we're discussing here are beginning to filter into the larger public. You know
Absolutely.
what I'm saying? So therefore, it's important and necessary that we continue to speak our minds, man, and to speak our piece.
Definitely.
So having said all that, I'm going to switch to my other computer, man, and hopefully it won't take too long to get up and running. And I'll link in there. That way I know I'll be heard.
Okay. All right.
So let me initiate that process right now. You don't have to take me off until I get back on until I get on the other one.
Okay.
Yes? All right. So I'll be doing that right this second.
Okay. And while you do that, I will shout out some of the people that have come through. Appreciate it. We got Jarvis in the house. We got Brother Damon in the house. Brother Youssef. Afro Nerd. What's up? Support Afro Nerd Radio. Check him out. Good to see you in here. Busy Mike. What's up? Aqua Techie. I'm just kind of hopping through a sower of seed. What's going on? If I skipped you, it's nothing personal. I'm literally just letting my eyes fall where they are. Heru, what's going on? KJ Eternal, what's up, Mark? Brother Cameron, congratulations to Brother Cameron. You know what it is. Brother Art Newstel, good to have you in here. I was on Newstel's show not long ago. If you haven't supported Art Newstel's channel, please make sure you're doing so. We got a number of people that came through. Let me see. Abdullah, what's going on? Got Joe Average Brother in here. Aquateki, what's up? Micah, what's going on? Tim Howard, appreciate that support. Says salute Dr. Johnson, Green Gorilla, and chat. Absolutely. Appreciate that. T-Rex in the house. Dardar, what's going on? Brother Ian, shout out to Ian. Got to see him for a little bit when I did a Obsidian show last Saturday night. So if you haven't had a chance to check that, Obsidian and I had an interesting conversation this past Saturday night. So shout out to him. Let's see. T-Mac says, Dr. Hasan, I'm sure the entire Black community wants to hear a true intellectual debate. These women. Well, I'll say this. I'm in agreement with Green Gorilla. Dr. Umar did well. And I've heard Dr. Umar defend Black men, clarify Black men historically, intellectually, before I was introduced to the manosphere. Obviously, he has a different take on the manosphere. He somewhat sees it, much like he kind of sees Cynthia G in a particular way. But to hear him use the talking points he did and make the arguments he did, which was very reflective and of what we say in this space, was interesting. So we'll go through it and check that out. We'll go through that with the support of yourselves, as well as getting to hear a chance to hear what Green Gorilla's thoughts are on specific aspects of the discussion. Right. Shout out to Donnie Mac. What's going on? Doc Montgomery. What's going on? Butter Bean. What's up? So Green Gorilla, you set? I guess he's still coming through. All right. Let's see. Yeah, appreciate that, Greg. Yeah, Obsidian show was on point. I enjoyed it. We had a chance to have a good conversation, and most particularly about the Black male political agenda, which is one of the things that I'm trying to push so that we can take this discussion that we've been having in certain spaces on social media and actually transfer it into some kind of political mobilization where we take the ideas that Black men have been discussing here and actually give them shape in terms of policy. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. What's up, MLR? Good to see you in here. So yeah, that's what's up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and start the earliest part of that while Green Gorilla is getting set up, and let him come in on it where he comes in on it, kind of go from there. So hopefully, let me see, I'm going to backtrack a little bit from where I had it queued because I just want to make sure you guys can hear it. So what I want you to do is be prepared to put a 1 in the chat if you can hear it, put a 0 in the chat if you can't. Right. So I'm just going to give you a little tester sample for a few seconds just to make sure the sound is working. So here we go. All right. I keep forgetting I listen to everything on high speed, but so I had that faster than I wanted to. But yeah, so here we go. Okay, so put a 1 or a 0 in the chat. 1 if you could hear it, 0 if you couldn't. Let me know if we're coming through okay. Okay, so Joe Herb is 0. And could you hear the clip I just played? A lot of people are saying 0. Very interesting. All right, let's see what's going on here. Wow, all kinds of zeros. Well, it looks like we're having all kinds of sound issues tonight, aren't we? Okay, let me check something. Check. You guys can't hear anything right now? Anyone else talking? Check. Wow, this is a trip. Check. Yeah, this is ridiculous. We're getting all kinds of sound issues, and we seem to be okay a little bit earlier. He's having the same problems I'm having. Now, Jay Single said 1, so I don't know what's going on. The 0 is if you can't hear it. The one is if you can. No, I'm not playing video. I'm just playing audio. So if you can hear a woman's voice, let me know. I'm going to start it right now. Just put a 1 if you can hear it.
Check.
Oh, shit. Back up a little bit. Just let me know. So I see a little bit of a 1. We'll try it one more time. I had to rewind a little. If you can hear this woman's voice, put in a 1. I'm still getting zeros. This is okay. Let's see what's going on. This is strange because it's showing up in the proper place, and I'm not sure why. I was listening to it earlier. It seemed to be working. Okay, hold on. Okay,
can you hear me, Doc?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, man. For some reason, I can't hear you though. It's like it's crazy, man. This damn thing pissing me off right now, man.
You can't hear me at all.
It's like it's always something, bro. You know what I mean?
Hold on.
Always something, man.
I'm gonna go out.
This goddamn thing. Hold on, man. I don't want to curse all on your show, man. Hold on. Let me hit a few switches. This shit got me. Oh damn! Now you done fell out. You have to apologize. We have to apologize, man. We don't mean this right now.
Yeah, man, this is ridiculous.
Hold on, man. Let me find out what's going on, man.
Can you hear me now?
My whole audio rig is soon as you turn her off for 1 minute, man, she wanna start tripping. You know what I'm saying? Like she calling the police or something, man. And she the one that started the shit.
You can't hear me, Green Gorilla? All right, hold on.
Speak to me, man.
Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
Okay, now you can hear me. All right.
Yeah.
I can hear you. Now we just got to make sure we can hear this sound because they haven't been able to hear anything. So if y'all, hold on. So this is ridiculous, man.
Y'all I can't hear a damn thing.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Now let me see. I'm gonna play a sound clip. Tell me if you can hear it.
No, I can't hear that, bro.
Wow. God damn it.
We all screwed in the game, man.
Man, I don't even know what's going on, man. The settings are exactly the way they usually are.
Yeah, I hear some.
Okay.
Yeah, static attic.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys aren't hearing that, let me try and adjust some of the sound settings. But this is annoying, man.
Yeah, it's annoying. You know? Yes, it is annoying.
This is stuff that I thought I handled years ago, and every blue moon, it'll just come in crazy, and you'll be like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, if I turn this joint off for a while and don't restart my computer, it'll start tripping.
At least you know what it is, because this usually I haven't changed anything. And this time I didn't do any system updates either, so this is frustrating. But let's see. I think I have an alternative. So let's try it another way. Did you hear that music?
Yeah, I heard that.
You heard the music.
Yes, sir.
So we are in some kind of business, because at least there's something I can do with that. Oh my God. I apologize to the listeners. But I tell you, when you are doing your own production, these are the kind of things you gotta deal with. They can
man.
They can definitely happen, and you may not have much of a say about it.
Oh, we gonna be on track. We gonna do this shit.
Yeah, we are doing it, damn it. We are gonna do it.
Might have to take a minute for us to get there, but we gonna do this shit.
All right, so let's try it this time. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if you guys can hear this as a beginning point of where we're going to jump in on this discussion on the Tammy Mack show on Fox Soul.
It can only do that if we acknowledge that there's a problem outside of us. Dr. Umar, you, my sir, are a Black man. Why should I care about a war being?
Now I'm just assuming you could hear that, right?
I can hear it, but I can't see the image moving.
No, I'm not playing the video. I'm just doing the audio. Okay. We got a lot of ones in the chat. So yeah, I'm playing the audio and not the video. So here we go. Dr. Umar is about to comment on whether or not there's a war on Black men
waged against you.
If you care about the future of Black people, then you naturally have to care about the destiny of Black men. When you look at most of the pathology in the Black community today, from Black on Black crime to single female-headed households, to poor academic outcomes, to unemployment, much of that is due to the war against Black men. So if we want to survive and thrive as a Black family and as a Black community, we have to implement solutions for Black men.
So Cynthia G says that the war is waged against Black men towards Black men. So everything that you just listed, Cynthia would suggest that that is the fault of the Black man on his own.
And I would disagree with that. All of the problems that Black men have were introduced by the white power structure. We do not control the school system. We do not control the criminal justice system.
Right.
We do not control the economic system.
Right.
All of the problems that we struggle from were introduced by the white power structure. Black on Black crime is a byproduct. It is a second-hand influence of the white power structure against Black males. Stress, depression, fatherlessness, unemployment, miseducation, lack of economic opportunity. These are the ingredients that contribute to Black on Black crime. You cannot do an effective and accurate analysis of Black on Black crime until you first do an effective and accurate analysis of white on Black crime.
Cynthia G, you say what?
I say this is the typical Black community's dishonest. I'm going to blame everything on everyone outside of the Black community and ignore what Black men are choosing to do. The reality of it is the system is not making Black men do anything. Whether Black men have schools where they can send their boys to is up to them. Whether Black men just choose to educate themselves so that they're qualified for positions that will give them the income they need to support their families, that is on Black men. Nobody's forcing Black men to walk away from their children. Nobody's forcing Black men to murder Black women every 5.5 hours. No.
Okay, hold on. Gigi, you've heard this argument that Black men are murdering Black women every 5 hours, haven't you?
Yeah, I heard that bullshit. She a motherfucking lie, man.
That is not what is happening. That is inaccurate. And in many respects, this is one of the problems I have with social media. Shout out to Spain, man. I see you in the chat. I don't know where you're saying I'm missing your communications, but good to see you in here. But, you know, this I think part of what it does to have access in social media is it kind of makes everybody seem the same. So, you know, you got, you know, somebody who's been doing this work for years, who's been studying, who's been writing, who's been going around the world lecturing. And then you got somebody like Cynthia who just gets on and just says whatever she feels like saying. And somehow we take it as there are two, you know, balanced arguments that we need to decide between. I mean, this is ridiculous. She's just saying things that have no backing. And she continues to do this throughout the video. But your thoughts on it, man?
Man, the reality is, I've said it like time and time again on my show, you know, women, no matter if they're Black, white, or whatever the case may be, and it's even more pronounced when it comes to the Black community, women are just as likely, if not more likely, to assault their intimate partners if they're men, as are men. Let me put it in simple terms. Women engage in domestic violence as well.
Yes.
Okay? Damn near more than men do, okay? Statistically, it's roughly equal, but I mean, for the most part, you know, that's never discussed or talked about. And then also, at the very same time that all of these arguments began to pop up about how brutal Black men were, okay? And I'm talking in particular about the development of something called dominant feminism, okay? Right. Authors like Catherine McKinnon, who's a legal scholar, Andrea Dworkin, and Ellen Pence, they developed these ideas about men wanting to be in power and control over women, and that they do so through means of violence, okay?
Right.
Or the threat of violence, okay? Now, Ellen Pence recanted this whole notion somewhere around 98, 99, Okay, and she basically said she was engaged in confirmation bias, and she was neglecting to take into account some of the etiology, meaning like what is the source of this kind of violence. Okay, but there, people have been doing research on this for over 40 to 50 years, man, and they found that women are just as likely to engage in domestic violence as are men. But again, going back to what I originally was trying to put forth. From the year 1976 to 85, right when they were developing these theories, black women were the #1 killers of their intimate partners or their husbands.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, the whole moniker of us being, these abusive men, it stuck. And not only that, domestic violence in the black community is on the downslope.
Right. Well, part of it.
We're talking. It's just like homicide. People talk about homicide so much that we neglect to understand that the homicide amongst black men has gone down since the 90s. It's down, and it's the same for domestic violence. But they use this hyperbolic language in order to present themselves as the penultimate victim. Okay,
But here's part of the problem, though. If you don't even have a definition for female-initiated intimate partner violence, it's easy for it to go unrecognized. If there hasn't been the creation of any kind of identification and concepts, vocabulary for it, gender studies, for the most part, the way it initiates these conversations about violence, they're already framed in terms of one dynamic, which we've seen popularized by the Duluth model, which is male to female. There's no public, as far as the public imaginary, there's no sense that women can pose a threat to men, at all. Even when women do initiate violence, it's interpreted as self-defense. So so that's why I go back to vocabulary. If there's not a framework, and I mean that even in terms of a visual imagery, we talk about movies, we talk about media. Since the 1970s, we've been seeing film after film about male violence, husbands beating wives and fathers beating children. And once you have these dynamics in place, when you see a news story about a woman that killed her husband or shot her boyfriend, the immediate interpretation we run to is either self-defense or some kind of crazy instance. But the underlying logic is a man pushed her to it. She doesn't own her behavior. So this idea kind of keeps us from actually looking at the reality of female, women being human beings, right? Shout out to Gear 5 Corey, who points out every 5 hours is 4 days. So he's talking about every 5 hours, the argument Cynthia G just made, where a black man kills a black woman, is roughly 4 a day. That's 1,460 a year. If you look at the data behind intimate partner violence, it's literally a couple hundred women and just a little bit less than that in terms of men per year. That's really what we're looking at. And we find out a little bit more the more states report on this. But at the end of the day, the violence that men experience isn't far from the violence women experience. And we haven't had decades of training, social and societal and media-based training to get people to interpret violence that men experience as part of the dynamic. We don't have that. If anything, when we see violence, we laugh at men that experience it. It's funny. It's something to be talked about that men, it can be laughed at. And this, you see, I want to show you something. Gigi, I don't know if you've had a chance to see this at all, and the way the system is working today, I don't even know if y'all gonna be able to hear it. Shit, but ridiculous, man. But I'm gonna show you guys something real quick. And Dr. Curry commented on it a little bit earlier today as well. So this is something I posted on my Facebook page, and it's actually something a black male experience. Let me go ahead and open it up. Okay. Did you hear that?
I did not hear that. I didn't
hear it, but you can see it though, right?
I see that. Yeah, I see that.
So if you see, I don't know what's going on with my sound. It was working fine earlier, but anyway, as far as that, what it was a guy in the shower. He was talking to somebody, and apparently his significant other walked in and began to attack him in the shower by hitting him with a belt. Now, this is also something we saw in a movie that came out some years ago. It was a Black Christmas movie where the emotionally abused wife gets back at her husband by oiling up the floor. So when he steps out of the shower, he falls all over the place while she whips him with a belt and runs out of the house. So it's not surprising to all of a sudden see these kind of images coming out from social media where people are abusing men. And for the most part, when you look at the comments behind a lot of this, it's considered funny. But if you think
it's like people keep thinking that because men on average are bigger than women, that women can't do damage.
Exactly.
But the point is that women can kill men. They can stab their spouse or their boyfriend. They can poison them. Mm-hmm. They can cut him, shoot him. Like I just had a partner man whose wife stabbed him. Mm-hmm. And he had to go to the hospital, get some stitches or whatever the case may be. But the reality is, we have to stop presenting arguments as if all of the pathology is coming from one area, one population, namely men, for one. Okay. But feminists open this door. Okay. And Black women are just so, eager to rush in behind them with the same talking points. Mm. And most of it is just hyperbolic bullshit.
Right.
Now the question is when is this going to be cleaned up? Like, I'm not saying women are innately or essentially evil either, because most of the time, relationships don't have domestic violence. The larger share of relationships don't have domestic violence. Okay. Only 24% of relationships roughly, have DV. And when you have it there, the prevailing, amount of it is what they call bidirectional. Okay. And it comes from escalation of conflict. Right. And it's not just something that men are doing. And this has to, we have to be candid about this, man, because the problem, if you want to perceive it as such, it'll never get rectified by incorrectly misdiagnosing it. But this is what we continue to do.
Hold on. I want to get something in real quick. So shout out to Astro Knight. He said, I said this before, all I'm hearing from women in the panel is that they don't want to do the women role except for the trans, and that's sad. So appreciate that support. We also have a couple. I want to run through the super chats real quick so they don't get away from me. Shout out to Frankie Iconoclast. He says, profound. Shout out to Wade, who starts to talk about decrying absentee fathers as a non-starter. Shout out to Afro Nerd. Says Fox created a Black audience platform to troll Blacks is unconscionable. The alt Black women with Cynthia G discussing traditional Black male-female relations is insane. Alleged Black women speaking with no data. Okay. And then shout out to MS Delta Guy. Appreciate that generous support of $100. Says, gentlemen, please keep teaching, preaching, and reaching. Much appreciated.
Do me a favor, man. Allow me to share the screen so I can show some shit of my own. You understand?
Will do.
Because this is it's starting to piss me off, man. Because we're in the information age. Okay. If you decide that you want to have a thoroughgoing understanding of what's actually happening in the community, as opposed to continuously just browbeating people with ideology, you can figure it out. Okay, if you want to. Or you can continue to push narratives and ideologies that get us nowhere. This is moralizing. And then you got these pea-brain people on YouTube, there's an audience for this, okay? And it's unfortunate that a lot of this is coming out of the academy. It's unfortunate, man.
Well, we just got 2 more super chats and we can put what you want on the screen. So let me just so we got Roaring Sun. Why are Black women always looked upon as experts on Black men and masculinity? Isn't that interesting? That is a valid question. Black men can't speak for themselves or on themselves. They damn sure are not allowed to speak on Black women, but somehow, and this is actually something I've seen in the academy as well. I've gone to conferences where Black women can hold panels on themselves and Black men. But if Black men hold panels on almost any subject, the question is always asked, Why aren't there women on the panel? Why aren't there LGBTs on the panels? And then if you're going to talk about Black women, it's only under a very strict set of codes as to what you can say. Shout out to T-Mac 1979. I think Umar held back, mostly because his financial basis exiled him like T.D. Jakes. The debate was mostly incendiary remarks against Black men. Okay, so I want to get back to the video, but you said you wanted to show something first.
Yeah, I'm gonna show two things. The first thing I'm gonna show is this fiber study. Can you see that?
Yeah, go ahead. There we go.
All right, so it's an annotated bibliography that basically interpolates 343 scholarly investigations. That's a lot of damn scholarly investigations, in case you know,
right,
on a subject matter. Okay, right. You don't usually get that many people talking about something, weighing in on an issue. Okay, you just don't. Okay, but here you have an example that demonstrates that women are as physically aggressive as men in their relationships with their spouses or opposite sex partners. Right. Now you can go look at the studies. If you want to look at this shit, you can figure it out. Okay, or you can go to some hyperbolic justice advocacy group website or something like that for women that basically cooks the books and tells all of these damn lies about how brutal men are. Mm-hmm. Women are doing the same shit that men are doing.
Right.
And men can't perceive their own victimization in any of this because they're caught up in this whole I'm an alpha male, can't no woman do this shit to me until it happened to you. Okay? I don't know any weak dudes in my circle, okay? One of my friends got stabbed by his wife. Now, it don't take a motherfucker to have a great deal of strength or prowess to stab you with some shit, especially if you ain't even looking for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay? It can happen to anybody, man. If your wife decides to pick up a gun and blast your ass, or your girlfriend, what the fuck you gonna do? Unless you Superman, you faster than a speeding bullet.
Right.
I mean, you guys need to stop this, man. And all of this just basically is centered around these intuitions that we have about people's virtue, men and women's virtue specifically. That women are demure and passive, men are aggressive and active. Okay, these are all tropes and stereotypes, all right? But women can be just as nasty and violent as men can. These are just the facts, okay? Another thing I want to show, and I'm gonna stop sharing that and then share something else, and then I'm gonna be done with it, and then we can move on and proceed with the show. Mm-hmm. But let me share the screen again. Chrome tab. All right. So anyway, I came up on this. The U.S. Department of Justice. Women as the aggressors in intimate partner homicide in Houston in the 1980s to the 1990s. Okay? Now this is just Houston, okay? But this is kind of indicative of what's occurring in larger metropolitan areas all throughout the United States, bro. Okay? Mm-hmm. Basically, here's the annotated abstract, okay? The study examined the prevalence of women as offenders in intimate partner homicides in Houston between 85 and 99 using a measure known as the spousal sex ratio of killing. The race, ethnicity of the offenders was determined as the legal status of the relationship. Over the study's 15 years, women composed 40% of the offenders in domestic homicides. Both victims and offenders in these cases were disproportionately black. Black women were equally or more likely than black men to be the perpetrators of intimate partner homicides. Within the small number of cases that involve Hispanic couples, women were significantly more likely to be the aggressors in the latter period of the study. For both black and white perpetrators, women were more likely to be the perpetrators in non-marital intimate partner homicides. Right. So all of this shit about men doing X, Y, and Z, okay? Cut the fucking rigmarole. Cut the rhetoric out. Mm-hmm. Come to us with something more than moral browbeating.
Right.
And intuitions about what men are doing and what women are doing based upon tropes and stereotypes. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, man, as somebody who's actually taken the time to look at this shit, I'm sick and tired of motherfuckers like this, man, spewing forth the fuckery that keeps the whole community in disarray about what's actually occurring there.
Right.
And until we can actually, mitigate what's occurring there with truth, until we can do that, man, I don't want to hear that shit. I'm just tired of hearing people like her, man.
And here's a brief question before we jump back in. What happens in a society when you've actually eliminated the threat, or you eliminate the possibility of women being able to initiate violence against men, and then trained women to believe that no matter how violent they're behaving, it's acceptable, because violence, true violence, only happens when men initiate it? What happens in a society after about 50 years of that training?
Basically, you get a whole bunch of bold motherfuckers to think that they got a free fire zone. They can tee off anytime they get goddamn ready.
Exactly.
They can do anything that they get ready when they get ready, and then the whole narrative, the script, the discourse is all predicated upon power and control. And so men are the ones who are doing this. Even if men are getting slapped, punched, kicked, bitten, it's still you. If you do anything, if you push the bitch off of you, excuse me, for using that language, but hey, man, I'm an OG, man. The whole point is, you get a woman doing this shit, if you get her off of you, you got a whole bunch of white ass knights coming in. That's a whole female. That's a woman. You can't hurt a woman, but a woman can do damage and she can do harm with no consequences. No moral proscription, no nothing. This is an issue. Because if you got one group of people, a whole damn demographic, that can do bodily harm to you, and you can't resist against it, you don't even have the preponderance of the narrative behind your back saying that this is something that they can even possibly do, then what you get is you get a catch-22 for men caught up in any kind of situation, and women know that they can use this shit. Amber Heard tried to do the shit.
Yes.
Megan Thee Stallion tried to do the shit.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of women out here, man, using this as a fucking con game.
See, and this is what I was saying before, where even the accusations of violence are violence, particularly against Black men, because we know there's a long legacy going back to slavery where the accusation of Black male misbehavior can often come with death and incarceration. So if the accusation alone is a form of violence that Black men are particularly vulnerable to, what happens when Black women can participate in that as well? When women across the board can initiate, violence in terms of accusation, most particularly against Black men, but then they can engage in violence and it still becomes Black men's fault. That is the problem, even if Black men are not initiating it. This is why you'll see so many Black men engaged in violent situations with intimate partners who don't respond. I played video after video about men in physically violent situations with intimate partners, and they are not responding. And the interpretation some people have is that they're cowardly, they're weak. No, they understand that they're the ones that are going to have to suffer and go to jail, even if they haven't initiated violence, because it is an accepted trope that violence only works one way. And so what I think we've created in this society is an entitlement. It is an entitlement that women can do no harm, girls can do no harm, and it even starts in childhood. It starts the very first time a parent grabs you and says, don't you hit that girl back, even though she socked you in the eye and she's just as strong as you are because you're both 6 years old. That's when it starts.
But let me just say this more generally, man.
Girls learn in that instance that nothing they do is a problem. Boys learn they got to be somehow accountable, even if they haven't initiated it or haven't responded. And if they're punished for responding and defending themselves, it's somehow a crime. That's the beginning of it. Well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Man, look. Here's the reality, right? Charles Murray has been, he's deceased now, but he's been like one of the leaders in the development of research about domestic violence. And one of the things that he wanted to draw out or draw attention to was the fact that violence is a socialized response that people typically learn in childhood from corporal punishment itself. Okay? Now, this is why, we need to start doing, I think I need to do a show on Stacey Patton, because basically, I think you know who Stacey Patton is. She talks about how you learn how to engage in violence in childhood by the corporal punishment you receive for your parents. So when you want to punish somebody who's done something offensive to you, the first knee-jerk reaction you have, typically, is to use violence or use a whipping as a means by which to show that somebody's done something wrong or to, gain some kind of control, okay, over being offended or whatever the case may be. But the reality is, in
look at the majority of black families are single parent families run by women. Most of the violence that black men learn, they learn early on in their childhood development years. They learn this shit from their mothers. Okay? There's a link between corporal punishment, and you can't say black women ain't out here beating their kids. Kids are the most vulnerable human beings out here, right?
It's not even a guess. If you look at the child maltreatment report of 2020, it highlights that those who are committing violence, even to the point of murder or death, in the community, as far as children are concerned, are overwhelmingly parents, i.e. mothers, because that's the majority of parents in the black community, most particularly. They're women. You know what I mean? The categories are so distinctly played out. I did a whole episode looking at the child maltreatment report, and it showed it is mothers who commit violence against kids. They're the primary caregivers of the children. So you're absolutely
the first experience many black boys have with violence is at the hands of their own mothers, man.
Absolutely.
That's just the reality, man. That's where we learn violence from to begin with. And you know, the funny thing about this, I got some things to say about this lady, man. Because at the end of the day, man, you know, people like her, man, continue to put out all of this rhetoric, but they're not interested in solving any of these issues anyway. Most of these people who subscribe to these viewpoints are zealots. They're not amenable to reflecting on what they put out there or what they've ever read. All they care about is continuing to push this narrative so that they can present themselves as the penultimate victim. Because there has been policies and laws developed, and they don't want to lose their power. They want to be able to maintain control over being able to jam you up if they so desire.
Right.
These are the facts, bro. Right. You know, or they want to be able to present you as a specific kind of, you know, essential character, right? You are the abuser. You are the batterer, not them.
Yeah.
This shit is going on too long. Now, how could it be that a woman like Amber Heard, who was arrested for beating up another white woman, how could she be the poster child for violence against women?
Right.
How is that even logically possible? If they know her record, all they got to do is do a basic research and they'll see it. Okay. How can you not know that Megan Thee Stallion was arrested for DV when she came out herself? She came out herself and laughed about the shit and joked about it.
Right.
She was arrested. Now she's a poster child for violence against black women. How the fuck do you do that?
Yes, sir.
Like this culture is involved in schizophrenic mental states, bro.
Yeah.
Like where we can't accept the fact that pathology is not coming from one demographic or one population.
No, not at all.
I'm sick and tired of this bullshit, bro.
But she's comfortable enough to do it because this is acceptable in society. So I want to continue with this. Let me see. Where did it run to? There we go. All right. So here we go.
Nobody's forcing Black men to abandon their children, publicly display how they don't like or care about their children. No one's forcing Black men to do anything. And I think it's a great disservice to pretend that someone is forcing Black men to do things rather than to put the accountability where it needs to be, which is Black men. If they have an issue with the system, they should have addressed it a long time ago. You don't get to complain that you don't have any power in a system that you didn't fight to have power in. You fought for assimilation. You did not fight for equality. That is on you. I think we're making excuses at this point.
Dwan?
And I would like to say,
Go ahead, Dr. Umar.
Briefly, that Lyndon Baines Johnson had commissioned a Kerner Commission in 1967-68 to investigate the causes of the 1967 Red Hot Summer. As you know, there were more race riots across America in 1967 than any other year since 1919, led by Newark, New Jersey, and Detroit, Michigan. The Kerner Commission were experts in criminology, sociology, education, politics, and etc. They produced a book that is, I believe, at least 500 pages that details the reasons why those riots took place.
Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Kerner Commission report, you can check for BGS Idmore and Art Neustel. I believe they did a whole series on the Kerner Commission. You can get into that, and they went through chapter by chapter, if I'm not mistaken. So go ahead and check that up. Look up Art Neustel and BGS Idmore right here on YouTube, and engage that dialogue on the Kerner Commission. Here we go.
And according to the president's own commission, the problems that exist in the Black community were created by the white power structure, maintained by the white power structure, and enforced by the white power structure. So Cynthia G's position is totally inaccurate and has been refuted by expert testimony coming from the Kerner Commission itself. And I would also say, good sister, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. One of the reasons Dr. King was murdered is because the Kerner Commission was released, which would have gave Dr. King all the ammunition he needed to lead his breadbasket campaign. Even the white power structure admits that the problems Black men face were introduced by the white power structure.
And to go on top of that,
now, is there anything you want to say about that, Gigi?
Come on, man. Like, all of this is really leading to one point, man. That the racism in the United States is primarily a form of misandric aggression.
Yes.
At the end of the day. So, you know, like, eventually what these women are going to end up saying is that Black women got magic. They have magical powers because they're able to circumnavigate the system.
Right.
But you playing the game on easy. We playing the game on realism levels. We're getting the bulk of the aggression, the violent, most aggressive forms of violence are directed towards us, okay? And not to say that there's none being directed towards them, because it is, okay? But primarily, when you engage in a process of marginalization from a group, you attack the men most violently, most aggressively. That's what you do. Like genocide studies, that's why Tommy Curry is important. He did a review of genocide studies, and basically, I mean, you know, they already know. They've been doing 40 to 50 years of research on this issue. And typically, when you got a population that's being subjected to this kind of colonial conquest, basically, what you do is you attack the men. You hamstring the men. Right. And these women, I mean, you know, look, we can talk all we want to about how women are getting ahead, how they're being educated, Black women specifically, how they're doing much better than men. You ain't really doing that much better than us. I mean, in terms of wealth building, you might have a career, you might have a title, you might have a degree. But at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers and you compare and contrast them to whites, we still broke as hell out here, man.
Right.
We still ain't got no bread saved up. We still ain't got nothing. And that's the issue. So fuck all the damn titles. Fuck a PhD. Fuck being a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever the case may be. Most Black people, I ain't talking about the unique, you know, upper middle class Blacks who are able to, you know, build some modicum of wealth. But when you compare and contrast what even they have related to white folks, you ain't got shit.
See, and that's why we got to shout out Nameless Protagonist. He brings a point. I was actually about to bring this up when he said it. Social dominance theory already spells out that men are the targets of racism. This is where Dr. Tommy Curry pulls the argument about racism as misandrous aggression. It's pulling out of Jim Sedanius's social dominance theory and the whole framework about subordinate male target hypothesis. Shout out to, he continues, he says, even the ISIS reports from Francis Cress Welsing said the same thing. The Man Not from Dr. Tommy Curry is a manifesto of breaking this down. There is empirical data. And this is data. The interesting thing about Sedanius's study is he didn't limit it to looking at racism in America with Black folk. He actually talked more about, historically speaking, whenever you had one group attacking another, it usually came down to it always came down to the men, primarily targeting and attacking the men of the other group, right? So this is the point of the focus here. And that's what we're pulling up. This is not to eliminate Black women's experiences. It's to point out that this is not being rooted in ego when we talk about the vulnerability of Black men. It's not about ego. It's not about victim Olympics. It's not about, or oppression Olympics. It's not about trying to disprove feminists just because we don't like what they're saying. No, this is empirically driven. If we look at those who die most at the hands of police brutality or lynchings, historically speaking, if we look at the numbers behind it, even in terms of slavery, right? We've talked
Here's the issue.
Before. It's not until the early 1800s before Black women are targeted to be brought over to the U.S. Prior to that, for at least 2 centuries, it was primarily Black men who were worked to death. The focus is not accidental. It's not arbitrary. It is very specific when it comes to the attack of Black men. Go ahead. What were you going to say before I replay? Yeah.
If either it's low level conflict, because right now I would consider what's going on in the United States to be low level conflict, right? And Tommy Curry talks about this. And you got high level conflict, which basically is direct physical violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it usually happens most aggressively towards men, but if you eliminate the men, it eventually ends up happening to the women. Like when you get to high levels of conflict amongst racial groups or ethnic groups or religious groups,
right,
they're coming after you next. This is what we're trying to say. Okay? Now, you can take it how you want to take it, or you feel like there's this narrative out there that will allow you to gain 30 pieces of silver for throwing us under the bus. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay? But at the end of the day, when these people get through fucking with us, they're gonna come to you next. It is what it is. This is historically demonstrated from culture to culture throughout history. Okay? Going back to 5,000 years. They will kill women as well. They killed women at Auschwitz, didn't they?
Yep.
They hung black women from trees just like they hung us. Now, they hung more black men from trees in the South than they did black women, but they did hang black women from trees. Okay, so just because you got this backdoor opportunity by, coming in, dovetailing white women, and the reason that they, the civil rights movement was basically usurped by feminists, bruh. These second wave feminists. They came and basically said, we taking over everything that y'all marched for and fought for. It's called Title VII, bruh. It is what it is. When they introduce sex into the equation, basically, all the shit we fought for together as men and women just went out of the door. And now you think, okay, well, I'm a black woman, so I'm doubly oppressed. Come on, bruh. The numbers, the data on every indice of well-being, it just doesn't add up.
Doesn't support the argument. Right. But it isn't to say, as you pointed out, it isn't to say that black women aren't under threat. It's simply to say it's a different reality. And when you get black women to invest in it, and we're going to hear Umar kind of comment on that in a moment, we find there's a whole nother level to be considered. So let me continue. Hold on. Let me go ahead and bring up. I'm trying to get it to a certain point. Okay, so we'll move to 1442 because I'm not going to play it straight through. What I'm trying to do is bring it to certain moments where we can kind of hear some of the more critical parts of the discussion. So here we go. There's another part here.
Let me make the math.
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, we have to make sure that we conduct a systems analysis and an institutional assessment. Communities are made up of institutions or the lack thereof. Communities are governed by systems or the lack thereof. Let us be very clear about something. This fratricide, this black on black crime that so many of our brothers are engaging in, let us remember Irish did the same thing. Italians did the same thing. European Jews did the same thing. And in the 1930s and 1940s, the United States government decided to upgrade them to white status, and in so doing, gave the Italians control of the fire departments in the black community, gave the Irish control of the police departments in the black community, and gave the European Jewish immigrants control of the civil service municipal jobs that they still control in many city centers today. The point that I'm making, Tammy, is that America gave Southern European immigrants an economic stimulus package. Before they gave that economic stimulus package to Jews, Irish, and Italians, they were doing the exact same thing black men are doing today, selling drugs, breaking the law, running in gangs, killing one another. But the government intervened and aided them. The reason black male pathology is still going on 30, 40, 50 years later is there has been no resolution, there have been no solutions, and there have been no governmental intervention. With that being said, I'm not waiting on the government to solve the problems of black men. We as black men have to unite, come together, organize, and solve our own problems. Just because we can admit that the government introduced pathology into the black community, we can still take full responsibility for ending it ourselves.
Now he's responding to a part that I skipped over. Shout out to Life of Commerce for the generous donation. Shout out to Akialis Crown. I apologize if I mispronounced that. But he's responding to Cynthia G making the argument that the only significant violence being extended is not from white society or white supremacy to Black America or Black men. It's from Black men to Black men. And he's responding by pointing out the need for systems, systemic analyses, as well as history. Any reflections, responses to that, brother?
Sorry about that. I had my mic turned off in the interim, but here's the deal. We already saw what was happening to white folks during the Great Depression. Then you get FDR, he comes with the New Deal, okay? And, they did what they could. I'm talking about the federal government of the United States to make sure that white folks who were immigrating into the United States or who had recently generationally had come into the United States were going to be interpolated into the social body, okay? So Black folks, they began to move away from the South to the Midwest and to the North, away from the South to, escape Jim Crow. But what they did when they got there, they basically got the hand-me-downs from white folks who basically were being moved into these public housing projects, okay? But the white folks in the government said, hey, look, these are temporary conditions. This is not a permanent fix to housing, okay? So what we're going to do is create FHA loans, and we're going to give GI bills to veterans so that they can have an economic floor, and we're going to do so through the real estate market. Black people were barred from being able to enter into these kind of agreements so that they could build up, this economic wealth. But the white folks, they looked after their own under the pretense of, looking out for their kith and kin. Okay. Right. Black people have never been able to be fully integrated into those programs. So this is why you have people like Yvette Cornell and Tone Talks basically arguing for the fact that this situation needs to be repaired. And injustice has been done to us over the centuries in this country. We've not been allowed to participate in programs that help to develop people economically and socially. And so he's right to talk about these issues. He's right to discuss them. But see, a person like Cynthia G, all she wants to do is cast stones from a glass house. Because at the end of the day, what Umar is going to end up saying is it takes both men and women to cooperate together in order to throw off the yoke of whatever kind of oppression they may be facing. It is what it is. You can't do it alone. It has to be done because we're inextricably intertwined. Black women give birth to black boys and girls. Black men give birth, not give birth, but their seed leads to the development of black children.
Right.
Okay, there's no way to separate this. Most black women are going to have black fathers. Most black boys are going to have black mothers. And the problem is, if you don't love the fruit of your own womb, what does that say about you? If you feel like what comes out of your own womb is morally or essentially decadent, what does that say about you? Because it comes from you.
But the interesting thing is that black men can become the face of not loving what comes from us, even though the data shows that we're actually more participatory as fathers than any other racial group. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy where most people have learned to perceive black men as the face of deadbeat daddyism, if you will, even though the data shows otherwise, and black women are not even allowed to be critiqued. And yet we're the bulk of the problem as far as they're concerned. So it's interesting to see how that's kind of transferred to the mainstream in this last few decades. But let me go back to the clip and let's let them continue from here. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna scroll ahead a little bit, kind of time some of these out because I didn't want to play the whole show, but there will come a point where we're just gonna have to play what we play, but we're not quite there yet. So here we go.
Aged against you.
Well, there's definitely some truth to it, but I think that truth is also evident in black women. Black men, many of them may choose to want a white woman, but many black women choose to look like white women. So we have to look at ourselves and we have to recognize that the pathology is not more of one gender than the other. That's the issue I have with conversations that seek to see who is more at fault, the black man or the black woman. It's not about who's more at fault. We rise together or we will perish together. The Black man cannot survive without his woman, and the Black woman cannot survive without her man. And the issue that I take with my two sisters' narrative is I hear a lot of criticism, I hear a lot of condemnation, but I don't hear any empowerment. I don't hear any solutions coming from either one of them. It appears as if that there is a hatred towards Black men by those sisters. Even when they said, why are we going back to 1960? Let's stay in 2022. That is so immature and irresponsible of a statement. As a psychologist, when a client comes into my office, the first thing I perform is a history on their depression, a history on their suicide, a history on their anxiety. When you go see the medical doctor, he performs a history. When you go buy a home, they perform a history. When you go purchase an automobile, they perform a history on that automobile. But when we talk about the problems that affect Black males, we're supposed to look at it in a vacuum. We're not supposed to put it in a historical context. And with that being said, the language and the narrative that's coming out of the mouth of these two beautiful Black women is one that I think the white power structure would endorse, because it totally absolves them of any responsibility for the hell Black men catch in this country.
Cynthia G, you did say, why are we going all the way back to 1960? There is some truth to history when it comes to evaluating anything or anyone. So what do you say to that? I hold that thought, because I only got about 30.
We're going to skip over the little commercial. And while I scroll to that, anything you want to add before we get to continue that, Gigi?
Yeah, so, ultimately what Cynthia G basically tried to do was to say that Black men are engaged in, like this misogynized attitude because they don't like themselves, really. They don't like Black women, okay? But like the whole manosphere, if you listen to what's being said, we're talking about the various behaviors that we see our women engaged in that's pissing us off. That's making life more difficult for us on a day-to-day basis. We already got to deal with the white world we're dealing with, but then we got to come home and we got to deal with clout chasing and set tripping. That's one of the things we got an issue with. And then the triangulation with the system in order to control and to dominate us. And it's getting to the point where Black men they're not holding their tongues anymore.
Right.
And of course, Dr. Umar Johnson is being more diplomatic than I am. But I'm not trying to say that all Black women are engaged in fuckery, okay? Right. And that they're essentially bad. Okay, but you can't just, Black folks, man, have internalized racism, right? That's why I did a show on the dial test before. Most Black people have basically internalized their own inferiority to some degree. To think that women have been able to escape that altogether in this country is laughable. It's nonsensical.
Right.
But we are not even allowed to talk about the ways in which it is manifesting itself in our contemporary culture. And that's problematic in and of itself. Frantz Fanon talked about it. It's just absolute. Feminism has given women the audacity, okay, to basically pathologize everyone but themselves. They can point the finger at everybody but themselves. And right now, it's impossible to critique women at all. Fanon, like I said, Fanon did it. David Walker did it. I'm pretty sure, Elijah Muhammad and Farrakhan did it at certain points. Why are women off limits for being critiqued? All we're saying, we're not saying that women have an essence that's evil as much as, at least not me. All I'm saying is there are policies, institutions, and laws in place which enable them to do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. Okay? And until that shit is rectified, you're going to continue to see this kind of behavior, man. And now you got narratives coming out of these universities which paint women as passive victims who are basically walking around like Mary Poppins, couldn't hurt a fly. And it's absolute nonsense, man. And it's up for us to clean it up.
But part of the issue too is what a lot of people don't understand about what's happening with Black men on social media and the conversations Black men are having. A lot of this is reparative on its own. A lot of this is self-reparative because there have been decades where Black men had no major platforms And we had to sit and watch. We had to sit and listen. We had to sit and be told how monstrous we were in every medium conceivable. Outside of maybe comedy and hip hop, Black men had to sit and listen and watch themselves be disparaged publicly and globally with no adequate response. And so now you actually have Black men creating their own platforms to get to each other and actually have a dialogue about what we've been experiencing, which is being interpreted as a reflection of Black feminism. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is a response to 50 years of degradation on a macro social level that Black men are reparatively dialoguing with one another about to get a handle of and create a vocabulary for. It's not the same, because that's one of the things I hear. Oh, well, these brothers just sound like Black feminists. No, it's not the same thing. We didn't have decades of Oprah. We didn't have decades of these kind of films and books. And none of this was required reading. Gigi and I can give you a list of classes that we had to take, and some of which we chose to take so we could better understand this, but also reading assignments that we had, which were as misandric as much of the misogyny Black men are accused of in popular media. But we had to read them in class. You had to read them to get your doctorates. To my knowledge, Kevin Samuels is still not required reading in any university that I know of. But much of what we had to read in regard to Black feminism was required reading. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is this entire space where Black men are talking is a product of responding to decades of degradation, coming mainly from the mainstream and the mainstream's propping up of a certain Black feminist narrative. And brothers are trying to get hold of it. And the interesting thing about it is they're getting hold of it on every class level. So in this space, you're seeing brothers who run banks, who own large-scale businesses, in dialogue with brothers who sleep on their mom's couch. It is a cross-class, cross-geography, occupation framework or dialogue where Black men are comparing notes. So I just want to put that on the table. And this is one of the reasons why Dr. Umar Johnson, who is not somebody associated with the manosphere, has had tension with the manosphere, is making the same kind of points, because at the end of the day, much of what we talk about is beyond trend. It's beyond what folks feel like doing. It's actually based on what is empirically been proven over decades. Okay, so here we go. The conversation continues.
The historical context.
I say we should go to the historical context, because what I have not heard from Dr. Umar Johnson, or I think his name is Dewan, is what I have not heard as they're mentioning all of the things that was done to them. I haven't heard what you did in response to it. And so I would like to know, what did you do in response in history, other than go to the Supreme Court and petition to have access to the men's women that you're complaining and accusing of disenfranchising you? See, because in the 1960s, what Black men were really doing, and it's been documented, many civil rights leaders have admitted to it, what Black men were doing is chasing the white man's woman, trying to so-called stick it to him by way of going to their women. What you should have been doing is trying to get liberation for yourself. What you should have been trying to do is get that foot off your neck. But see, the foot is not on your neck, and the only time you recognize it being on your neck is when you want to get away with doing something that you think white men are getting away with doing. Because let's just be real. Whenever we hear about this war against Black men, it's usually being brought up when there's a Black man like R. Kelly, Bill Cosby. We see Trey Songz going through it, Ari Spears, when they engage in some degeneracy.
I just need to say real quick, this to me is such a disrespect to Dr. Umar. It's like debating with an 8th grader. And the fact that he has to give the impression that they're on equal terms. So whatever problems people may have with Umar here or there, the brother is a researched and he's a scholar. And he has to debate this 8th grade argument as if they're equal arguments. That's one of the things that really the social media flattens out a lot of this, and it frustrates me. But
this is why, like, man, first of all, this woman is a bubblehead, man. Just to be quite honest, she doesn't have an original thought in her head. She, look, social media, Black people use social media as a means by which to get, acknowledgement or fame, or to get money. Okay, the people who should be on this show should be persons like you, Curry. You know what I'm saying? or Dr. Neil, or, you know, people who actually have been studying these things for a long, long time and can really actually, you know, give voice to some of the problems and the issues that we have with one another in relation to this so-called gender war shit. But instead of doing that, they go pick up the person who has a popping social media channel.
Right.
And then, you know, and all they do is parakeet, mimic, ape, and Xerox the talking points that they got from blogs and shit like that. Because they not reading articles, man. They not reading academic journals, trying to, you know, figure out what the hell is going on. From trying to see things from different angles, taking in all perspectives. And what you said earlier, Dr. Johnson, was right about our education. Let me tell you something, bro. I have a PhD in philosophy. Now, I curse like a sailor because I'm trying to keep a common touch. But when I took feminist philosophy, feminist epistemology, and feminist social and political thought, that shit wasn't required for me, although some courses did have it interpolated into, you know, the syllabi and the curriculum. But I did that shit as an elective to try to see what it was about.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, has she done as much reading as I have on these issues? I doubt it.
And these people won't even, and I'm not even talking about just about Cynthia. I'm talking about, you know, common everyday feminists who take issue with a lot of what they hear. We read through books for decades behind feminist philosophy. They won't even watch a 20-minute video. I get these long-winded feminists that like to have these long, protracted arguments in my comment section. Most of the time, they don't even watch the videos. They're responding to the thumbnails and the titles. Even when I run into them occasionally face to face, what they don't like most has nothing to do with what was actually said. It has everything to do with what they interpret as the tone based on a title and a thumbnail. But you had to sit graduate course on Black feminism, right?
Man, I didn't take it just on Black feminism. I had to read all of it.
In general, yeah.
I had to read it all from beginning to end. Mary Wollstonecraft, all the way up to Brittany Cooper. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. Like, but here's the thing that gets me about all of this. See, what they don't say in these courses is that Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were racist as hell, and they use anti-Black misandry in order to propel their own issues to the forefront. They never talk about that.
Right.
Okay, not in the classes, in the seminars. Now, you can go back and read Black authors and like a Curry or somebody like that, and you'll get it. But they don't come out and say that in these seminars. They act like they were just engaged in justice work. They never talk about the underside or the underbelly of all of this. Right. Okay? They never discuss it. At least not the white professors where I attended university. Okay? Right. They never talk about the issues and the problems. First of all feminists are not in agreement with each other. You know? But it really gets my goat, man, to hear somebody so ignorant and so uninformed. It gets my goat that they have such a big platform. Because they get to proliferate the same bullshit day in and day out. That's how they eat. They're not trying to resolve issues. They're not trying to look at things from a panoramic perspective. They want money from hate. Yeah. This is what they do, man. And then they accuse us of hating. All we've ever said is, look, everything you accuse us of doing as Black men, y'all doing the same shit. You talk about homicide, y'all doing it. Talk about sexual assault, y'all are doing it. Okay? These people act like they're angels. This is the problem with feminism, man. It typecasts men as evil, women as pure, and there's no in between. And they do so by only making reference to an elite group of men. They don't look at the lived experiences of all men. What they do is they just assert that all men have privilege.
Right.
Which is absurd.
Hold on. Part of what we also have to understand, though, is that this is and I've been saying this for years, feminism on its largest scale, and even when you talk about Black feminism, is fundamentally a political coup. It is an attempt to marginalize men without question, particularly Black men who have never held a position of authority to oppress anybody that white men have, but alongside that, it is an attempt to mobilize women to take a certain type of political posture that extends them a certain type of control. And in that respect, that's why you can hear Cynthia G going ham without any research, just jumping into arguments without having to preface anything with anything statistical. And when she does throw statistics, none of them are backed by anything solid. She can do this because there's an environment for her to do it. There's an audience for her to do it. And those same women are the same ones that have mobilized since the 1980s, particularly in the Black community, to take over politically as far as the Black vote. This is why nobody goes to any great lengths to talk to Black men about what we want politically when they want Black votes. They go to Black women. This is part and parcel to the same dynamic. So she's part of a larger context, because in any other setting, especially an academic one, if this was a genuine argument, she'd be laughed out of the room. But she's not. And she's able to sit on a panel with Dr. Umar Johnson. And again, regardless of what you think about him, he's still a scholar. They shouldn't even be able to have that conversation. But she can.
And then to be so brazen about it, like at the end of the day, bro, I take umbrage with the idea that you got somebody so ignorant and so uninformed, right? That's able to, like you said, take a platform with somebody who's her intellectual superior. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. Right, but this is where we are in 2022, man.
Yeah.
I don't see anything changing in 2023. They're not going to let go of this narrative. They're going to continue to push it as long as the policies remain in place. And we all know you and I both know what the policies are and where it comes from. Okay, it comes from Title VII, Title IX. It comes from the Duluth model of DV, and it comes from people in the academy who basically want to continue to promote and endorse these policies, even though we know that they're not absolutely accurate and they don't work in the best interest of men, Black men in particular. They know this, but they're not going to stop because it gives them a modicum of power.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue.
And then they're getting the consequence for it. And Black men think that because they perceive white men to be getting away with crimes, they want to be able to get away with crimes as well. The reality is, Dr. Umar can sit up here and list all the different ways that the system is disenfranchising Black men and Black men in a victim vote. But the reality is, what he cannot tell you is what Black men did in response to it, because they did nothing. They laid down and they nested under the skirt of their non-Black preferences, and only to complain that whenever they commit a crime, they're not getting off like they did.
So let's find out. Dr. Umar, what have Black men done?
Well, number one, again, I think that it is such a shame coming from a psychological perspective that we seek to heal our wounds as a people by relying on unprofessional testimony by individuals who have a vendetta against the opposite gender in their community. When you hear Sister Cynthia speak, you can hear a hurt and a pain and a hatred towards Black men. We cannot find an effective solution to Black male-female relationship issues or the oppression of Black men or Black women when the people at the table having the conversation have negative, emotional, and pathological interests in the conversation that are not.
Umar, the question wasn't about my emotional state. The question was, what did Black men do in response to their disenfranchisement? Yeah, because you're trying to pathologize my emotional state, not knowing that I'm a psychologist too. But what you're not doing is telling us what Black men.
So wait, you hear that? She said, I'm a psychologist too.
She got an undergraduate degree in psychology, I guess. So that makes her an expert. You know what I'm saying? This is the kind of cockamamie bullshit that, you got to deal with in 2022 because everything, like you said, has become level. There is no expertise anymore. It's just opinion. Yeah. Over and over and over and over and over. That's sometimes why I retreat from the space, not to, say that I'm like trying to get away from it, but sometimes you need a break because it's just a whole bunch of opinion. No delineation of facts, no discovery of research. It's just a whole string of opinions. Again and again and again. It gets tiring to me because I like to fact check and I like to dot my I's and cross my T's. Okay? But like just the constant opinion. It makes my philosophical soul, man, feel like I'm slipping off into the abyss.
Yeah. Here we go.
I believe he'll get there, Dr. Umar.
May I finish?
Dr. Umar.
And I'll end it quickly, Sister Tammy. According to Mrs. Cynthia G, Dr. King was assassinated because he was doing nothing. Malcolm X was assassinated because he was doing nothing. Medgar Evers was assassinated because he was doing nothing. Fred Hampton was assassinated because he was doing nothing. That narrative that Black men have done nothing to fight back against systemic oppression, not only against ourselves, but against our women, our children, our elders, and our community is absolutely ridiculous. The cemetery is filled with Black men, names we know and names we don't know, who gave their life for the freedom, liberation, and emancipation of African people. How can you disrespect the history of so many Black men, past and present, who continue to fight? I'm sitting in the school right now that we built with all Black money, 4 buildings that we're going to educate Black men in. It's not easy to solve our problems because there's always Black people in your very same community who's fighting against what you're trying to do to help it. But in addition to that, the white power structure is always waving its wand of oppression to try to sabotage anything we do. I think that the analysis of our women is too overly simplistic, and in being such, it is dishonest.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that part. So, you know, like eventually, like I knew that the Black nationalists would have to take this turn. You know, at first it was all about queendom. And look, I'm not trying to say that Black women essentially are problematic, but to argue that after 400 years of being in this country, being marginalized, subjected to violence, dominated damn near in every way, that they will not have internalized anti-Black racism themselves is asinine. But we can't even explore or discuss or be candid about the ways in which it manifests in their behavior because that's considered to be misogynistic now. Okay? That's the problem. So this is like preemptive strikes. Right. Like, to me, that's what this is. You know, this whole narrative about women being oppressed and being subjected to violence, it came out of the mind state of white women. Okay? And we already know, I think one of your chatters stated the facts. White women were slave owners, virulent racists, virulent segregationists. Now all of a sudden they want to talk about their own oppression? You were part of the system. You participated and benefited from the system of decadence. But now all of a sudden they become a minority group. The same people who own slaves now get to say that they're in a worse off condition than the people who they enslaved. Because they have a vagina and we have phalli. This is where it's come. This is where it's come down to.
Right.
Okay. And some of the biggest proponents of of stymieing programs that could help us are white women. They're the biggest proponents trying to thwart and stymie and object to anything that might give us a leg up. But they do it in plain sight and under the veneer of trying to champion women's rights. But tell me, the second wealthiest demographic in this country, they're a minority.
Right.
I'm talking about white women.
Right. Right.
They're a minority though. The same people who was at lynchings or was the catalyst for a great deal of them. They're all of a sudden oppressed now?
Exactly.
Come on, man. Like this, Black folks, man, this is why Jacob Carruthers wrote the book, Intellectual Warfare.
Intellectual warfare, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, this is why you got people like Amos Wilson and Bobby Wright, whom we've forgotten, because nowadays everybody's talking about these feminist intersectionalists like they're cutting edge thinkers related to oppression and domination. Okay? All the people that we had, like at the beginning, this is why I say, man, like Black studies has become a shell of its former self, man. It ain't what it was. Because the Black studies programs, African American studies, started out of the cauldron of what was happening in the 60s and the 70s and the rioting that was taking place.
Right.
That's where the energy came from.
Right.
But now it's some whole different kind of energy. I'm a gay, lesbian, trans woman, like this. It's a whole different kind of energy now. And we can say, okay, well, look, some things that happen to people who are, you know, subgroups within the black population, we ought to deplore them when they happen, okay? And the people who engage in violence against people who are innocent, it ought to be, you know, it ought to be punished, okay? We can admit that. But come on, bruh. Like, we dealing with a bigger population of persons than a small subgroup of African Americans, man, who are going through the gridiron. I mean, you know, like, we're on it. And dealing with, in real time with a whole bunch of issues, but the only thing we can talk about is a small population of persons who ain't even a factor, man.
Right.
And this is my issue with this, bruh. You know, we can't even think our way out of this. We're so caught up in minutia and ridiculousness that we can't even see, like you said, what's the history? This is why me and Sandog are trying to go back and look at every stage of American history and what black people did, men and women did, in order to resist against their oppression. Starting from slave revolts and rebellions, escapes, on up to even fighting on different sides, you know, of the white colonial powers in order to try to gain some modicum of freedom. It ain't like we did this laying down. Like there's never been any resistance whatsoever.
Right.
Right? All we did was just lay on our backs.
But the fact that you have to make the argument is part of the problem. Who actually says that in the history of my entire racial group, half of the gender has done nothing whatsoever? I mean, well, for Cynthia G to make that argument, it's so asinine and ahistorical. And for me, what bothers me is that you and Sandog actually, and this is actually something Tommy Curry does in The Man Not as well. He has to answer the argument about mimicry, right? This idea that black men ultimately just want to be white men. The fact that we have to argue that in this discussion, when Umar actually has to name historical figures, first, Cynthia says he can't do it. And then when he does, she dismisses the ones, well, we're going to hear that in a moment. But I'm just saying, this is the problem. The fact that we have to answer bullshit from children is ridiculous.
Doc, man, imagine being a Vietnamese man, you know, fighting against the American forces, and you got some woman next to you saying you ain't doing nothing. You ain't winning well enough for me. I don't hear these kind of debates amongst other groups of people for real, man. I mean, I know it's going on between white men and white women, but like, to be perfectly honest, like I said before, man, I went to a white graduate school, man. The woman who was the head of the Women and Gender Studies department, her husband worked in the Women and Gender Studies department doing masculinist studies, bro.
Yeah.
Talking about many of the issues that we're discussing. And they go home and they fuck with each other every night. And they make money and they just teach courses and shit like that. And they might have their, you know, viewpoints, but they work together. They work together, man.
Yeah. And we're going to see it get more complicated in a second. Now, I have pulled out significant sections of the discussion because I knew Gigi and I were going to go in. So, you know, I'm doing it in choice kind of moments, but we're about to hear from some of the other people on the panel. And it's an interesting kind of thing to digest. So here we go.
In here real quick, Dr. Umar. I want to get Hope in here because Dr. Umar listed a plethora of black men that we know, and I'm assuming he listed the ones that we know so that we can identify and all agree that these black men have done something in terms of the fight for equality in America. How do you feel about those men that he listed, Hope? Have they done anything for the black community or not?
Most definitely, I would be ignorant to say that they haven't, right? But I think that what we're failing to realize is that when we have this conversation about what black men have done, the consequences are usually because of white supremacy and the gaze of white folks on us are that the black men are then taken away and the black women have to then sustain those things. To say that black women are unappreciative of that, it would be, I think that is the dishonesty, right? The way that black women show up for the black community and the black families, regardless of how we feel about the black men that we might be interacting with or the black men that are doing bad things, while still staying here to cultivate the black men who are, is, I mean, to overlook that to me is just dishonest. The idea that a lot of you all were raised by grandma them and auntie them and all of these amazing black women that are in community and share space with you and share space with your children, that's being being looked over. But also, this isn't, Dr. Umar, you're right. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that you said, but you're absolutely right. It's not about the idea of who's doing it better or trying to, the pissing match of the oppression that lives amongst Black people, but it's really about working together. The problem is, what I find in working together is that the Black man wants to lead, whether he's acquired the gumption and the knowledge to be able to do so appropriately and effectively or not. The thing about it is, when you're working together, we are a team. You get to lead this portion because you're better at it. I get to lead that portion because I'm better at it. And then we come to a common ground for both of us to succeed. But a lot of the times when we're talking about these succession plans and we're making all of these advocacy movements in order to progress the Black family, the Black man says, listen to me or fail. Right?
Now she's talking about, or this Hope is talking about the Black man and identifying all the problems. Now we do know that Hope is trans, right? Hope is a trans woman. So there's some interesting elements to consider, because when I first listened to this, I didn't know. So I heard it as just another Black feminist making the same kind of feminist talking points. What was interesting to see this coming from this Black trans woman is I heard no difference, right? And it's the same when I hear Black male feminists. There's never any pushback. There's never any qualification. There's never any difference. They toe the line to Black feminist talking points all the way to the T, to the point where as long as the voice sounds female, if I close my eyes, there's no difference that I hear between them. But Gigi, do you want to weigh in on this before Umar responds?
Man, look, all that is the patriarchy narrative. You know, that men want to lead, but they don't have the capacity to lead. Or they want to lead in areas that they're not particularly proficient in, just because there's a pecking order, a gender pecking order, namely that men are supposed to be in control. But I mean, you know, look, starting back in the 70s, the early 70s, man, a lot of Black women who were involved in the civil rights movement defected. And they basically sought to put an end to the perennial race man, okay? The Black nationalist man was derided and denounced in the Combahee River Collective.
Right.
And one of the objectives of intersectionality is to prevent the emergence of another race man. I mean, like these are the facts. Like, we want to lead now.
Right.
We're educated, which, you know, first of all, just because you go to a white university doesn't mean you know what the fuck is going on politically in this country. I'm just being honest about that. So you can have as many degrees as you want to. If your brain is still chained, you're still stupid. If you still don't understand what's going on in front of your face, you can't see it in real time, you're still dumb. You're still a dimwit, a bubblehead. Okay? The reality is, these people have sought solace under the wings of these white people, man. The white women. Okay? Weirdos, whatever you want to call them, it is what it is. But they've sought solace, and to me, it's escapism. It's like, okay, I can separate myself from what I consider to be the most pathological in the Black community, namely Black men, because we already know racism primarily is a form of misandric aggression. We already know this. So now you can hide away from it. You can abscond away from it by declaring you have nothing essentially the same about you, your character, your physical appearance, your physical embodiment or somatic, appearance. You have nothing to do with Black male pathology. And I think that's a lot of what's going on. Right. But at the end of the day, you still can't escape it. You still can't get rid of it. It's still right there staring you right in the face, just like you're looking in the mirror. You can't abscond away from your Blackness. And unfortunately, for most Black trans women, they can't escape from it either. Now, the more you look like a woman, you might be able to escape it, but you still dealing with the same issues that Black men. If you were born as a Black male, you still got some problems, partner. It is what it is.
Okay, here we go. Let's hear Dr. Umar's response.
Right? As if Black women have nothing to contribute to that. And I think that that's where the problem is. That's where the discourse needs to happen, is how do we work together so that Black men understand that we are meant to work side by side and not with me following you with my head down and saying, yes, that's our master. Because that is me being subservient to you in a way that I might not want to do, especially considering if you do not have the credentials, the know-how, the wherewithal, or the lived experiences to lead me in a way that I might be better suited to do in this point of our journey. And
Dr. Umar.
Well, first of all, I do not endorse any kind of a second-class citizenship role for Black women. I believe Black women have as much to offer as do Black men, so I'm not sure who the Queen is referring to, because I am not a misogynist and I do not support that type of narrative.
Now, I should say that Dr. Umar made some points, because outside of this discussion, he didn't know that Hope was a trans woman. He said he would have had some other commentary had he known, but he didn't know. So we don't know what he would have said. I know I had the same response. I didn't know, because it reads different when you hear her go into all the things that you've always heard Black feminists say about Black men being a trans woman. It reads a little different. There are some other elements that could be brought to the discussion, and I think Umar would have spoke to that, but it wasn't presented that way. But here we go.
But hold on, wait a minute though, bro. See, here's the thing. And that's why I did that video on Brenda Werner a long time ago. Like about what roles Black men and women played in the civil rights movement. Okay, and much of this kind of, to me, is like an echoing of the Black macho. That like Black nationalist race men in the 60s were like tyrants. But then you got people like Elaine Brown who will come up and say, man, look, the Black Panther organization was a paramilitary organization with a hierarchical structure.
Right.
You did what you had the capacity to do. Whatever capacity that you were able to perform in that organization is what you did. Okay? She was one of the leaders of the movement, of the Black Panther movement, or the party. Okay? What about Kathleen Cleaver? Okay? What about Angela Davis during that time? What about Fannie Lou Hamer? Okay? All of these race women who were there in leadership in authority positions.
Right.
They act like they were just all relegated to the kitchen,
or the bedroom,
and barefoot somewhere. Like they didn't participate, like they weren't there at these debates. Like women had no participatory role in any of this. No Ella Bakers, no nothing. Like this is laughable to me.
But
now,
go ahead.
To argue that men are supposed to like take a back seat, like they can't have any authoritative position, because the idea is that Black men are too backwards and too troglodytish to actually step up and lead. That's the so if you do a backward looking analysis of history predicated upon the mores that you have now related to intersectionality, all of these people were considered to be regressive. Kwame Ture, Amiri Baraka, all of them.
Yeah.
Okay? They all were just sexist, patriarchal men who wanted to control and dominate women. Okay?
This is something we also see happening, of course, by the time we get to the rise of BLM, right? The argument is retroactive. The argument is that because Black men are so oppressive, now y'all need to take the back seat, let women and LGBTs lead. This is why Black men, heterosexual Black men, were not allowed to take any kind of authoritative position in the organization, because this retroactive idea that Black men were such monsters that they had to make up historically for what Black men in activist situations did in the past, right? And so the argument became that we as women and LGBTs are going to lead this fight, which meant that we're going to go to every situation that has called attention to race, which overwhelmingly were Black men being killed by police. But we're not going to talk about the Black men that are killed outside of a few talking points. We're going to name the person, of course. We're going to look at his picture. Then we're going to focus on his mother and her loss. Even if his father's in the picture, we're going to ignore him. And then we're going to bait and switch the conversation to talk about Black women and LGBTs, even to the point that right now, you have BLM falling apart from within, lawsuits going on from inside the organization, and they've managed to scapegoat a Black male in the context of all of this. It's a gay Black male because there ain't no heterosexual Black males in any position of authority, right? So you got a gay Black male put in position by Patrisse Cullors before she absconded from the organization, and now they're suing the only available Black men in the organization from within. They've identified no other women that caused the problems. You got women buying mansions with donation money, but they identified one gay Black male and made him the face of why BLM is falling apart. This is how deep the misandry goes. It goes back historically. It retroactively reframes the narrative that makes Black men monsters, and even in organizations used to uplift the community. And then even internal to the organization, they seek out the only Black men they allowed to be present, which were gay men and trans women.
And what's so ironic about that is, man, in plain sight, you saw a whole bunch of opportunists hijack a movement that started organically and use it in order to make economic profit, but that's not even being really discussed. That's not part of a popular narrative right now in the black community. These people are like, okay, we still got the ideology we have. Gay people and women can't do any wrong. So, maybe a black male who presents as a male can be, perceived as somebody who's doing something wrong. But like these opportunists who cashed in and cashed out, nobody's calling them out. Nobody's saying, hey, look, what about Darren Seals?
The organization.
What about people like Darren Seals who had boots on the ground down there before all the cameras came there? What about people like that?
He was just another sexist. That's how that's framed.
So, I look at all of this, man, and I say to myself, man, how far have black folks fallen, man? Like, how dumb are we? Like, how naive are we? It's just like we're lost. I don't know any other words for it. Like, we just completely, like Malcolm X said a long time ago, bamboozled, run them up, led astray. Mm-hmm. We're confused right now. We don't know what to focus on right now. So ultimately what it is, it's time to turn on each other. So, because white women turned on white men who really actually had power, and these were the same women, like I said, who were slave owners, segregationists, anti-integrationists, whatever you want to call it. The same people who were colonial settlers, now they become a minority group, they become oppressed, and everybody wants to dovetail and follow them. Even people in the black community want to follow that narrative. Right. And then now it's all about the violence that's happening in the context of the black community itself, as if it's only one source of it. Mm-hmm. It's time to dispense with this foolishness, man. Because if we can actually figure out what's going on in these communities, we can actually begin to take plans and make strategies to solve it. Mm-hmm. But we can't even get to that because all we got is a whole bunch of moralizing and browbeating and stereotyping and caricaturizing. Yep. That's all we have. But commence, bro.
All right, here we go.
That said the black woman's position is only to have children and to prepare food. But at the same time, I think black women have to look at themselves, because although white supremacy has been the greatest enemy of the progress of black men, you would also have to argue that black women have probably been the greatest accomplice to supporting the white power structure in their destruction of black males, i.e. the conversation we're having right now, where two intelligent black women have yet to indict white supremacy for the role that they play in the destabilization of the lives of black men.
So when we come back, we'll find out if the two beautiful sisters who are on the panel will indict white supremacy when we return on the business of being black with Tam. Obstacles than black men in other countries. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to know, is white supremacy responsible for any of the black man's plight at all?
Most definitely. Like, let's not play coy here. We understand the role that white supremacy has played. But I think that over time, as we learn the tricks of white supremacy, right, we learn to do better to defeat it. And I find that, especially as black men, a lot of the time when we're talking about this war on black men, we fail to realize that black women are underneath the same scrutinies. Maybe not in the same way and maybe not for the same reasons, but y'all are not going through this alone. And so when you talk about the ways in which black women have learned to take, what we're given and turn it into glitter and throw it up and make black girl magic, we wonder why those things are not happening for black men in the same way. And it's largely because I think that complacency happens. A lot of black men.
Now understand what she just said. The reason that black women can take this oppression, throw it up in the air and turn it into black girl magic, and black men can't, is because black men are complacent.
And that's somebody who was born as a black male. You know what I'm saying?
That's what the trans activists on the panel just said about black men.
Born as a black male, decided to become a woman, and now is throwing salt on the troglodytishness and the backwardness and the lack of initiative that black men have in order to struggle against or resist against oppression. But the funny thing is, every time we try to do something to form an initiative or to develop policy, guess what ends up happening? You got a cadre of white women, white trans women, white cisgender women that come up and say, oh, that's illegal. Can't do anything specifically for black boys. Can't do it. Came up with my brother's keeper. Obama suggested it. Oh, got a whole bunch of people trying to shut it down. That's not fair to the women. It's not fair to black girls.
And it's not limited to white. It's not white women and white trans. We got black trans and black women that'll jump up and say it before they will. You set up a school for boys, watch it happen. Go ahead.
But the point is, I'm not saying that they ain't doing it. They are doing it. But it's even more damning. Look look at the crowd of people you surrounded by and what it is that they're actually doing and the impact that it has. Divorce yourself from the ideology for a minute and look at the outcome of the ideology. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm asking for. Mm-hmm. Because you can equivocate, you can say something and put forth an idea out there in order to bring about a desired outcome or an effect without actually even believing in what it is that you're actually saying.
Right.
It's what I'm trying to articulate. Or even you can believe it. You can have good intentions, but be creating disastrous outcomes. The reality is, man, these people, man, are working vehemently. Not vehemently, but vehemently they are working in order to try to suppress every measure that we can use to mitigate our condition. Mm-hmm. And we already know that we bear the brunt of racial animus. We already know it. It's evidence in every metric that you can look at. When it comes to death, when it comes to incarceration, when it comes to police killings, when it comes to the educational system, we already know it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And instead of trying to help the people who need the most help, they have an analytical narrative, which basically defines themselves a priori as the worse off. And so nobody can come to our aid. We just gotta, like persons like Cynthia G say, we gotta John Henry our way out of this shit. As if you're engaged in a protracted struggle with an entire damn population of persons that is just one segment of the population that has to do all the heavy lifting. Like they don't have to provide support in any kind of way. They just kind of, triangulate the system to their own advantage how they see fit. The shit don't work like that, man. If I'm playing a basketball game and I'm trying to get down the court to prevent the opponent from scoring a basket, you get the ball and you throw around and you go around and you throw the fucking hoop you throw the ball in the same hoop that they trying to score in. It's a problem, bro. It's an issue for me.
But see, the subtext that bothers me here with what Hope just said about throwing up oppression and turning it into black girl magic, the subtext with her being with Hope being a trans woman is that black men could have black girl magic as well if they were just women. If they would just become women, they would automatically be good. But the fact that they're men and they're refusing to become anything else kind of implicitly ties them to this, black boy tragedy oppression dynamic. And that becomes the split, right? That becomes the split. You are inherently a problem as a black male. But if you are gay, if you are trans, or if you are female by birth, you are automatically absolved. And notice the other thing. You never hear anybody, particularly these feminists, you never hear them criticize trans men, right? So again, the narrative, if you are born female, LGBT, you're good. You've made it. You've already achieved simply on the basis of being. But if you're black male, you are automatically tied to this oppressive dynamic simply because you have a phallus. That's it. That's all it takes. And if you have a phallus, but you're willing to identify as a woman, now you're saved. So it's just this real thin line. If you just hop from one side to the other, you're accepted.
And the funny thing is, you're able to hitch your wagon to a whole feminist movement,
exactly,
and to gain endorsement and support from that. Exactly. And then now you declare yourself to be magical on that account.
On that account alone, absolutely. And you know what? The only acceptable heterosexual black males are dead. And they're acceptable because their memory can be reframed in anything they want. You ever notice how in the last 5 years, you've heard more black feminists talk about Malcolm X than any other time you've ever heard them? And the only thing they talk about is the one quote where you see him talking about black women being the most oppressed and abused. That's it. They don't talk about any other part of Malcolm's life. The point being, if you're a dead black male, and I continue this all the way up to BLM, because those dead black men were useful. They were useful for the advancement of the organization. They were useful for acquiring donations on a massive scale. They were useful as a stepping stool to a larger scale acknowledgement of their existence. They were useful. So dead heterosexual black men are useful. But if you're not dead, and you're not a woman, you're not biologically female, and you're not LGBT, you are inherently the problem. This bullshit.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Like your heterosexuality is a problem. Your maleness is a problem. Your blackness is a problem. I mean, basically, they're just throwing everything at us that racist white people said, bro. I mean, this to me is internalized racial inferiority, man, coming from that intersectional crowd, man. It is what it is.
But I'm gonna let them. Let's let them continue. Here we go.
And not all, are complacent with the idea of being saved by everyone other than themselves. They're okay with the idea of being saved by Black women, white women, women of all other races. They're okay with the idea of being saved by white men who give them the opportunity to come and be a part of this thing that's better than what they are. But what they're not doing is being complacent in the idea of finding their own solutions to digging their way out of the hole. And having one or two people that are speaking on it with the idea of inclusion or exclusion of certain people within the Black community is also a problem. We cannot build as a Black community if we want to throw out this group of people or throw out that group of people or tell these people that their opinions are invalid even though they're Black.
But the whole time you throwing out black men. Sorry.
Because they're mixed.
Hey, bro, like I said, I'm sorry about that.
What?
Nah, bro. I mean, at the end of the day, man, I already told you, like this whole narrative about how Black men are oppressing, marginalizing, and preventing Black people who are like subpopulations in the community from being at the forefront. It's all bullshit. It's exactly what they're doing. They're working tirelessly in order to prevent any kind of person that doesn't fit into their ideal about what a person's supposed to be. Okay? Namely gay, trans, or bi, or something like that. If you're not one of them, they're going to exclude you. Okay, because you're patriarchal, you're heteronormative, or whatever the case may be. Okay, we already know that's how they did in Black Lives Matter. They wrote like policy, like, okay, if you're in a meeting and and a Black man starts to speak, make sure that he gets limited time because you got to give voices to everybody else who's marginalized. Just not they can be talking the most. Soon as you utter a word, it's time to shut your ass down because you don't have the right standpoint.
But peep the subtext to that, though, right? Hope just got through talking about how men want to take leadership and control women, and Hope is not going to have the head bowed or follow any man. And it's like, so in essence, the way to absolve yourself of being considered a controlling, domineering, oppressive patriarch is just to be trans. And then you can identify with women to such a degree that you can point the finger as if, I mean, that's just it, right? So the antidote, and this is the core argument of it, the core subtext of it, the antidote to Black male oppressiveness is to just become women. That's the antidote. Women are in and of itself, and you've talked about this extensively, Gigi, when you talk about the idea behind womanhood and the history of that, particularly in Europe, right? The idea that womanhood is inherently sacrosanct, inherently perfect, inherently pure, right? And really there's no fundamental problem to it whatsoever, right? This idea is transferred and appropriated in some of these feminist talking points, even in Black feminism, where womanhood is inherently pure. And so now we've reached a point where the fundamental issue men have is that they're not women. That's their flaw. That is what locks them into an oppressive, domineering state that can only be resolved by becoming women or death. That's it.
Hey, man, like the misandry in this culture runs so deep. But the funny thing about it is, it's all upheld by patriarchy in and of itself, bro. And I'll talk about that if you want me to, but I don't want to expound on it right now.
All right. I mean, let's continue.
Incidences. And I think that those are the things that we have to focus on. The goalposts can't constantly be moved in this conversation whenever Black women start to make a point for the sake of Black men feeling like they need to be able to dismantle that in order to talk about how they've been hurt. We get that. We have to.
Cynthia G, white supremacy? Does it exist in your world? And has it affected Black men?
Absolutely, it exists. And Black men have worked in tandem with white supremacy since they've become in contact with it. And this is why I say in the Black community, we have very disingenuous, very dishonest discussions, especially when it's regarding Black men, because we do have a Black male worshiping culture. So what we do within that culture, and Umar Johnson is showing it today, is absolve Black men from any accountability for what they've done. Number one, we wouldn't be in a system of white supremacy had it not been for Black men. So if you want to go all the way back to history, then let's go back to history when Black men were selling their own people into white supremacy. Let's go back into history when 16 years off the plantation, Black men were worried about a war being waged on them. They were worried about getting access to white women. That's what you were worried about. And it's interesting. There's a reason why I feel like Umar focused mostly on me and Hope's attitudes, and it's because he can't accurately answer the question. He mentioned names, not accomplishments. And the reason being is because
I think he mentioned those names specifically because the accomplishments of those people don't have to be explained.
Right, but those accomplishments are also accomplishments that I've heard Umar Johnson speak negatively about, specifically the civil rights movement and how damaging it was to Black people. But now he wants to sit here and say the very people who accomplished that were accomplishing something beneficial when, in his own opinion, that wasn't beneficial and did more harm to the community than good. So I think that because we're having such a dishonest discussion where Black men don't want to take accountability for what they've done, they want to be the victims of society, but then they want submission from the women. The bottom line is I'm not willing to deflect from the fact that, number one, Black men are the greatest non-white contributors to white supremacy. Let's just be real. White supremacy couldn't even exist without Black men's compliance. They're always uplifting whiteness, biracial children, and trying to assimilate. And that's why I went back to the notion of the only time Black men truly feel like there's a war against them is when they feel like they're being punished for something white men do. At the end of the day, y'all drop the ball. You're blaming white supremacy on your failures. We already know there's oppression, but Black women are double oppressed. We have more barriers to face. You have male privilege in a patriarchal system and you can't even get it right.
Well, Dr. Umar, I think we all know your stance on interracial marriages.
Absolutely.
So please acknowledge what the rest of what Cynthia G has said.
Absolutely. I'm not sure where Sister Cynthia took history class.
She didn't.
But if you know anything about the transatlantic slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade was a European enterprise.
I'm talking about the sub-Saharan. I'm talking about the sub-Saharan slave trade. You should go look into it.
Excuse me.
You address me.
May I finish?
Go look into the sub-Saharan slave trade where Black men were trading their women and children for alcohol and tobacco.
I don't want a monologue. May I finish?
Go ahead, Dr. Umar.
The transatlantic slave trade was a European enterprise. It was not an African enterprise. Although there were some chiefs who participated in it, by no means did they control the direction and extension of the transatlantic slave trade. So that's number one. Number two, Black men resisted enslavement, not only on the shores of Africa, but right here in America. We celebrate Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosper. There's literally hundreds of documented attempts by African men to liberate not only themselves, but their women and their children. So to act like we just sat there and we're complicit in our own oppression is absolutely ridiculous. The other point I want to clarify for your information, Cynthia G, you've never, ever heard me condemn the civil rights movement. The good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a hero of mine. And despite me being a Pan-African nationalist, I take issue with other Black nationalists who do want to dismiss Dr. King's accomplishment. The civil rights movement was necessary because it removed a psychological scar that suggested of racial inferiority. So you've never heard me deride the civil rights movement. I support it, although I took certain issues with it. The bottom line is when Black women, Black girls, Black boys listen to this conversation we're having today, they're going to be confused because they hear two brothers speaking of a greater context to the problems that affect Black men. And you hear two intelligent, beautiful Black women who want to keep scapegoating Black men while ignoring the historical and contemporary systemic challenges that are constantly placed in our way. I'm going to say this and be quiet, Sister Tammy. I got to give you this. There was a recent piece of research, Tammy, that came out. And the research said a Black man with a master's degree, they did a study. They had white males who had come out of prison apply for jobs. They had Black men with master's degrees, Sister Tammy, apply for the jobs. And guess what? The white males with prison history and no education were called back more than 75% of the time than Black men with no prison history and a master's degree.
I'm aware of that. I am
supremacy?
aware of that of that survey. I am. Hope, I saw you give Dr. Umar the side eye.
It's only because I can't, you have 1,001 clips on the internet, but I know for a fact that one of the things that I was offended about in doing research or just seeing you on the internet is that you have definitely talked about your disdain for some of the practices. We can't
walk and chew gum at the same time. You can't agree with a movement and have qualifications, have issues with it while still overall. We can't do that. That's too difficult to do. Okay. I just want to be clear about that.
But all of that shit was to sidestep the very notion that Black men resisted against domination and oppression and enslavement and Jim Crow to begin with. That's all that shit was. That's a wild goose chase, red herring argument to begin with.
Right.
He presented evidence of Black men who actually, sought to obtain a modicum of freedom for Black folks as a whole. She was confronted with the evidence like the commentator or the person who's directing the show, like she said. Some things don't need to be said because they're already understood. Like, what is there to understand about Denmark Vesey or Nat Turner? What is there to understand about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X? Mm-hmm. What is there to understand about, Medgar Evers and people, who basically put their lives on the line in order to gain, civil rights legislation, right? There's no disputation. All Black men did, was what white folks said they did. Didn't do nothing.
Right.
All we did was sit around drinking watermelon, rolling dice, and playing pity pat, while the world around them just happened. Like Black men didn't create communities like Rosewood, that were destroyed by white mobs and white riots. You know what I'm saying? Like we just sat back on our hands and allowed ourselves to become what they say they hate.
Right.
At the end of the day, it takes a nations of millions to hold us back, like P.E. said a long time ago. But it also takes division, separation, and balkanization to hold us back. And right now, I fear, and this is what, Dr. Umar Johnson said earlier, like a lot of these ladies are participating in the very system of white supremacy that they say the Black men aren't actually challenging to any effective degree. Mm-hmm. I mean, and here's the deal, bro. Read the intersectionality article from Kimberly Crenshaw and ask if it's not an apology for the white state to intercede on the behalf of Black women because Black men are beating the shit out of them. Now, this is at the very same time the Black women were the leaders in domestic homicide. Now, I'm not saying that all Black women are evil or they're essentially evil, but come on, man, let's just call a spade a spade. How can you say that Black men are engaged and that are evil, but then you got Black women doing the same shit? How is it possible?
Uh-oh. Gigi, you're breaking up. I don't know if you can hear me. It looks like the sound icon under your image is not moving. So you might have to go out and come back in if you can hear me. You're breaking up. But I do also want to welcome another good friend of mine that I demanded come up and drop a word. Welcome to BGS More, and hopefully we'll get Gigi's mic working back again. What's up, man?
I mean, I can't. What am I going to say? We got our two esteemed scholars, man, ripping these people to shreds. What am I going to do? But even Claude Anderson said the vast majority of Black women were never brought here. Okay, until after I would say the 1800s, because then they brought them here for breeding. But it's if you read Daughters of the Trade, the slave traders had to marry into those families doing networks. So black women were side by side in trading, in actually trading black folks, okay, and trading black folks into bondage. So saying that black men sold their women and children into slavery, no. Okay, they wouldn't take babies. Okay, number one, babies would never make the voyage. Number two, they didn't want women because, especially early on in the slave trade, because the sugarcane fields are so brutal, women would not survive. In fact, the average lifespan, survival span on a sugarcane field was between 6 and 8 years. So many men died on the sugarcane field because the work was so hard and the environment was so brutal. They died. So a woman had no chance outside of breeding. Go ahead.
Absolutely. But here's the other side to that, and this goes back to Sedanius once again, who actually talks about the sexual dynamic. So again, he's not just talking about black folk and white folk. He's saying historically, whenever you've had an invading force come into another community and dominate it, you have the same kind of sexual dynamics that end up playing out. The leaders of the invading force are men, and they primarily attack the men of the force they're invading.
Right.
And when you start to talk about women in that dynamic, the subjected women become the spoils of war.
They become the concubines.
They become the concubines, but they also are able to negotiate, if you will, and use that term, a slightly better existence because of the sexual relationship, because of the dynamic in play. Now, you do have, historically, you've had white men that sexually exploited black men during slavery. There's no question about that. But above all, in the larger sense, the sexual dynamics between men and women are going to predominate this discussion. So I want to share this clip, this image, I should say, this page, which speaks a little bit to what BGS was talking about. You can find it on slaverebellion.info. And it's a piece called "The Black Slave Owners," right, by Dr. Joseph Holloway, who passed away a little while ago. Okay, so Gigi's saying the internet went down. Okay, so hopefully he'll be able to come back in. So come back in as soon as you can, brother. So Dr. Joseph Holloway talks about this, and I'll just lead you to the 2 paragraphs where he goes in. He says right here, the following chart on the left over here shows the free black slave owners and their slaves in Charleston, 1790 to 1860. In 1860, there were at least 6 African Americans in Louisiana who owned 65 or more slaves. The largest number, 152, were owned by widow C. Richards and her son PC, who owned a large sugarcane plantation. Another black slave magnate in Louisiana with over 100 slaves was Antoine de Blusset. I know I messed that up. Sugar planter whose estate was valued at $264,000 in North Carolina. 69 free blacks were slave owners. Now here you go. The majority of urban black slave owners were women. In 1920, free black women represented 68% of heads of household in the North and 70% of slave-holding heads of colored households in the South. The large percentage of black women slave owners is explained by manumission by their white fathers or inheritance from their white fathers or husbands. Black women were the majority of slaves emancipated by white slave-owning men with whom they had sexual relations. 33% of all the recorded colonial manumissions were mulatto children, and 75% of all adult manumissions were females.
Right, exactly.
Talk to me.
Yeah, exactly, because they were rewarded for actually producing a certain amount of children. And depending on the slave owner, if she could actually produce between 9, I think 12 children, she was actually given automatic manumission by her slave owner. Yeah.
Gigi, can you?
Boy, sorry about that, man. My internet, man. Optimum. It used to be Spectrum, but man, the people, man. I'm supposed to have like a gig internet, but it's unreliable sometimes. But I was hoping that BGS would come in and talk about the various ways that black women also participated in the slave trade. See, this is the only issue I have with these pro-women talking points.
Yeah.
They sidestep every form of culpability by pointing the finger at one demographic and neglecting to talk about the various things that their own population has done. That's my only issue. Now, my issue is not trying to attack them, to present them as essentially evil or anything, but to argue that the only group of people who've internalized racist attitudes and viewpoints being black men is nonsensical. We have like scholars who've been discussing this shit for centuries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, at least the last 70, 80 years.
Hold on, let me handle.
Well before that, yeah.
Hold on, let me handle some channel business real quick. We got over 1,020 people watching. Make sure you like the show, please. Because last time I checked, there was only about where'd it go?
We got 773 likes right now.
Okay. So appreciate
and we got 1,200 people watching. Come on now, Gigi. Gigi's a scholar. He hasn't been as active, and he needs support. Dr. J always needs support. He's trying to get these 14 political points off the ground that should support black men. Okay, you guys got 200 people in here. A $1 holler. Okay.
Yeah,
see, my point is not to engage in a tit for tat.
Yes.
My point is to evince the truth. The reality is everything that you blame black men for and use to stereotype them as troglodytes.
Yes.
Black women are also engaged in.
Yeah.
And the problem also is that the vast majority of black men are not engaged in the things that they use to stereotype and stigmatize us. The vast majority of black men are not raping women. No. The vast majority of black men are not killing black women or black men. The vast majority of black men are law-abiding citizens who are working the best that they can in this system.
Yeah.
They're doing the best they can in a crucible. It would help to have support because after all, you are our mothers. After all, you are our biological sisters. After all, you are our nieces and our aunts. But when you get married to an ideology, and the ideology has roots in anti-black racism, that's a hell of a thing to have to deal or contend with when it's only coming from one direction. Okay, like it's only coming from black women to black men about how how evil we are.
Yes.
But when we talk about the ways in which you engage in evil, it then becomes misogynist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a problem. This is the only, we're showing you in real time, day after day, that yes, black women beat the most vulnerable human beings on the planet. Yes. Children. Yes, they beat them. Yes, they killed them.
Yeah.
Okay, not saying black men don't do shit. We take responsibility for the shit that black men do. But let's be real about this, and this hasn't even entered into the equation right now. How many black women are sending conflicting messages to black men, on one hand, saying that they want strong black men, but at the same time doing everything they can to hamstring those men in their own pursuit of excellence and their own pursuit of virtuosity?
They want ConcuSurf. Like Doctor says, most of the violence in the black neighborhood is with the agreement of black women. The drug war turfs, because most boys and most men sell drugs to support their families and get out of poverty. Most of the violence you see perpetrated toward black men is actually proxy violence started by women.
Let me I wasn't done finishing the channel business, so I want to get this out the way so we can get back to it. But I do want to shout out a number of the cash apps that came through. Shout out to Angela, Elwood, Kente, Tahuti, Sherman, BM Rock. Appreciate that. And we also got Greg in the chat says, damn, this is better than Black Talk Radio and NYC before Kathy Hughes and Radio 1 destroyed it. PK Angel says, shout out to you guys. Shout out to PK. Appreciate that support. Rob T says they raise us. It's 70-80% single mothers. Okay. We got the Shack channel. I appreciate all the brothers on the panel. I don't know. CIPH Bud, appreciate that support. We got Brian McMurray. Shout out to you. Appreciate that. Lamel, peace doc from Brooklyn, NYC, first time donation. Appreciate that donation. Thank you. And I wanted to mention this. So this is Malarkey. What's good? Appreciate that support. Malarkey says Dr. Umar is the wrong person to confront CG. He views Black women as queens and isn't sufficiently red-pilled. Thus, he is somewhat sentimentally and theoretically compromised at the outset.
He is perfect for it because the biggest issue that we have, especially Doc knows this, right? Gigi knows this. The biggest issue is that the conscious community and pro-Blacks will not confront their women, right? And they duck this, right? So for Cynthia G to actually try to rip Dr. Umar a new one in public, you know, on a platform like this, lets them know that, hey, you too can get it, okay? You too can get it. In other words, the problem. You try to say that we're exaggerating the problem and the issues that we're having with our women, you know, in the manosphere. You just got it full force, okay? So you're the perfect person to actually get it. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think you're right about that, BGS. And not only that, I'm beginning to see a turn in the way that Black men in the conscious community are dealing with the whole context of the gender war. Because initially they wouldn't have said anything, okay? They would have done nothing more than talk about the Black woman as God, okay? Now, you know, I'm not disputing the fact that there's some divine essence to women or anything like that, because I think that there's a divine essence to men and women, and that both men and women have the ability to either exhibit viciousness or virtuousness. But the problem is, like Dr. Johnson said a long time ago, we've been hearing about our faults for 50 to 60 years, incessantly and we've been silent. For the most part, Black men have sat and endured the beating, the verbal lashing, the invectives and the diatribes. They just been taking it. But now you got social media platforms where you had a few men who began to speak out, some of the earliest founding members of the manosphere, okay? Whoever they may be, God bless you. You know, whether it be, you know, O'Shea, whether it be Angry Man, whether it be, you know, whoever the Obsidian, whoever they may be. Okay, if it's 2.0 to 1.0, Sergeant Willie Pete, BGS, whatever the case may be, thank y'all for having and conducting these conversations amongst yourself for so long. Now, we don't always get along. We don't always agree on everything, and that's impossible to gain consensus in any community, okay? Even within the context of a family unit, okay? But the reality is, we've been hearing how deficient we've been for decades. Now it's time for you to look into the mirror and to get some of this energy. You're going to get this work because you deserve this work. You can't ask for responsibility, power, and leadership without being accountable for the fuckery that you engaged in. Whether you got a vagina, a uterus, a phallus, or a scrotum. It don't matter.
But this is part of the issue too. When we talk about nationalists, and I have nationalist leanings, so it's not.
Yeah, I do too.
Not a total indictment, but what I am saying is the nationalist inability to call this crap into question is part and parcel of what's going on here. And so to have Umar use the same talking points as many of the brothers in the manosphere really just shows you how accurate we are, because he has no love for the manosphere. He really doesn't.
No, he doesn't. No.
But everything he said was the stuff we've been saying. You can't avoid that. And that's what needs to be put on the table. If it's coming from someone like him, how accurate are we?
You know what, Doc? Red Fox said something a long time ago, maybe 50 years ago, right? He said, heroes aren't made, they're cornered, okay? Sure. Dr. Umar may have just gotten cornered.
He got cornered. Well, he got cornered and he got pissed. Because now I won't say he's never experienced, shout out to Wrench Turner and Ninja Person, appreciate that support. I won't say that he hasn't done this before. I've seen him argue with feminists for years. There's a whole nother level of vitriol that we're seeing, and we've seen this especially since the death of Kevin Samuels. Right? And he's confronting that, I would say. You know, I don't follow him religiously or anything like that, but this new era that we're seeing of misandry coming from certain types of Black feminists is at a whole new pitch. And I think this is his run-in with that post Kevin Samuels. And he's, you know, and you can see, and I'm not playing it and playing the video, of course, But if you watch the video, you can see the exasperation on his face, the frustration, the rage, and the serious attempt to keep his poise. Because many people believe, and this is not spoken about, but when you talk about social media, especially on video, many people believe that the first person to lose their cool lost. First person to lose composure lost. And that's the dumbest thing. It has nothing to do with the arguments on the table. It's just about the visual element. It's just about who lost control, perception. That's it. So he's maintaining his poise to demonstrate that they're not correct. They're not beating him in any kind of argument. But if he loses his cool, which is what Cynthia G is trying to get him to do with these childish arguments, she's trying to get him to lose his cool so she can point to him and say, see, he lost his cool. I won. But
if he does lose his politics, cool, if he does lose his cool, especially Umar, so Cynthia G wears that B1 or that pro-black badge, okay, and if she pisses him off to a certain point, and I think she already has, she's gonna, that bloom is gonna come off the rose if it hasn't already.
Well, I'm not done playing him. I just wanted to get some things on the table. So,
but here's the deal. Before you even start back, the initial argument was that black men are participants in white supremacy. So says a woman who has on foundation that makes her look like one of the Damon Wayans brothers in the movie White Chicks with that fake ass weave she got in her head. You know, no disrespect to the black woman's aesthetic, but goddamn, man. We went from being say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Tonight, everybody wants to look like a light, bright, damn near white woman with a weave in their head. You know, like it's like look at the ironic presentation.
Yes.
Well, and
pay attention to it. Don't listen to what people say. Look at what they're doing and their physical embodiment of what it is that they endorse and they support. You got a black man, no makeup on, no fading of the skin, and then you got a black woman who we know her complexion don't look like that for real.
No, it doesn't.
I know you're trying to make yourself look good on TV, but you ain't putting on no colored foundation. You looking like one of the damn white chicks.
And he called her on it. He called her on it when he said earlier in the debate. Because I didn't play the clip where they were talking about it. I played what he responded to. But what Cynthia G was arguing is that black men want to emulate white men. And when I played the response, his response was, well, we can't just limit that to black men because you got black women that try to look like white women. And he was partially talking about her. That was what you call a professional academic dig that doesn't get, into the dirt. But he was digging back at her. Shout out to Cubert, who stands that amazing stream, gentlemen. Thank you for all your good work. Appreciate that. But let me go ahead and continue.
Of Dr. Martin Luther King. So to sit here and gaslight us as if most of us have not seen.
That's not true. Find the clip. Find the clip.
Well, Dr. Umar, you yourself said you yourself just seconds ago said you did find some things in the civil rights movement problematic.
But I supported the movement and I still support it. I visit
everyone supported
every time I'm in Atlanta. I have never been
as a black man, as a black person in
If
America,
we're going to have the conversation, let us be honest. Let's not misrepresent.
You're the only one not being honest, Umar. You're not being honest.
Find the clip. You don't have to argue about it. You don't have to argue about it.
You just admitted to it. We don't need a
60 seconds left on the 60 seconds left on this segment. We won't be able to find the clip on this show.
Find the clip.
But Hope, finish. Hope.
Essentially, whether we find the clip or not, we know that those things have been said, and you know that you've said controversial things. Once again, we see you moving the goalpost when you find
controversial according to who?
We find, once again, because my thing is you and Cynthia can have that dynamic, but I give you the space to speak. I've given everybody that space to speak, so please don't interrupt me. At the end of the day,
you interrupted me as well. Let's be fair.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
And so once again, here we go in a space where black women are making a point. It's more important to the
It's not about you being a woman. It was about you being incorrect.
When black women are
being incorrect.
I respect you. You were incorrect.
You
were incorrect. I didn't have the issue with a woman. You were incorrect.
Well, let's all breathe in, breathe out, and I'll take a commercial break. All right?
She said something that was
We'll take a commercial break and
not
come right
incorrect.
back to wrap this up on the business of being black.
They hate black men. That's the problem. They hate.
Ooh, there you go.
Tammy Mack.
Cut that out. Cut that out and print it. You can't make this up. Shout out to Kevin Sams. You can't make this up.
Hey man, like the ironic thing about this person here, man, is that they're wearing womanhood like it's the real deal Holyfield. Mm-hmm. No disrespect to trans persons, but I mean, come on, man. Like you going so far as to talk about the proclivities of what men, do in relation to having discourse with women. It's like, don't men interrupt other men like when they're having conversations? Mm-hmm. Like the idea that like it's a chivalrous notion to be quiet when a woman is talking, or to hold open a door, or to do something to defer to her because of her so-called virtuosity, right? I mean, that's all part of chivalry, which in and of itself is part of patriarchy, right? Yes. So the whole notion that like I have to behave in a way that women would behave when they're talking to each other, that's over with. It's done. You asked for the exact opposite. So I say, man, if you're a man, forget all the traditional rules associated with engagement with women. If you're in a leadership position, I don't care if you're a woman, a man, straight, gay, bi, trans, I don't give a shit. You're a leader, you're accountable, you're responsible, and you have to take flack just like anybody else in that position would. It's a dirty game. It's time to start being dirty.
See, part of what I would add to this is when we call out misandry, people think that misandry is just the most extreme examples, like when people on Twitter are calling black men bullet bags. But the daily, casual misandry, we dismiss altogether. We've seen that throughout this conversation, and having it called out as misandry is still something new, especially to black women who are not used to having black men push back against it. But the casual misandry that is daily, like even the feminists that come into my comments and want to have these long debates with me, and there have been several, right? When I call out the misandry and the statements they make, they don't know what I'm talking about, right? And part of that is an individual thing, but on a larger scale, a lot of it has to do with the fact that misandry has not been called out on a massive scale, even if it's low boiling, what Kevin called low boiling contempt for black men. It's never been called out before by black men in unison. And because it's now starting to happen, folks are losing their shit because they don't know how to make sense of it. They don't know how to respond to it. It's so baked in to African-American culture that they don't even know how to identify it. It just comes out like venom. So y'all keep pushing at it. Keep calling it out. Anybody want to say anything before I continue with the video?
Oh, good. Spin the clip.
All right, let's go.
I am Tammy Mack, and the business of being black today is there a war being waged against black men? Dr. Umar is getting it a little bit because he says the ladies are lying on him. And I suggest that you run through and roll through every interview and clip that Dr. Umar has to find the clip, as he would say. One thing I agree with you on, Dr. Umar, is a lot of times when we have these conversations, we start comparing black women to black men, and we tear one down in order to make the other's point. And oftentimes when I have these debates on the business of being black, I notice that is often the debate, to break the other person down rather than build them up. But I do want to do some comparative questioning right here. Do black men face more obstacles than black women? Dwan.
I don't want to put it in a more or less. We face different obstacles, but at the end of the day, this is what we can say is true. Black women have a safety net that black men don't have. If a black man loses his job, like earlier, what they're talking about earlier, black men have no accountability. Well, if a black man don't pay child support, he gets his license taken away, he gets his passport taken away, and he can't get a job. So there's accountability there. When it comes down to when a black man messes up, he's going to go to prison far longer than anyone of any other race or any other sex.
Yep.
So we have the most extreme consequences. But when it comes to a safety net for when we mess up, when we're down in our life, there are no programs for Black men. Nope. You can't go through the government and say, hey, if the Black men with children, here are these list of programs that only men can get. But it's a whole lot of stuff out there for women. So what's happening, what I'm seeing right here is a lot of lies being told, but lies of omission. Omitting these safety, the fact that women have these safety nets that Black men don't have, and also omitting the fact that in spite of all this, 3 out of 4 Black men still get married to Black women, and we still provide and we still do these things. So,
but
yes,
Dewan, what Cynthia would say is, how come you haven't created your own programs?
Well, I personally created my own program. I've written 2 books. You know what I mean?
But that's not a program.
No, I know. I also have a whole program on how to communicate to your children and how to communicate to families, because my thing is about solutions.
Well, you're talking about safety nets. So the question becomes, how come Black men haven't created safety nets?
Black men, the Nation of Islam created what they can create as far as safety nets goes. Black independent organizations create safety nets for each other all the time. I'm talking about governmental safety nets. We can't go to the United States and say, hey, we need something only for Black men, because it doesn't exist. There's a whole welfare program coming out in Atlanta that's only for Black women. Same thing in California. There's a whole universal basic income that only Black women can qualify for. Black men can't get.
But do you believe that that's because Black women came together and said we need a program?
No, the reason why that happens is because the white supremacist plays on this schism within Black society, and they give one side greater gifts than the other, and that can lead to infighting. And then people who don't analyze what's really going on, they're going to just see the result and not see the cause and say, what's wrong with Black people? That's the government's tricks going on like it's always done. Let's elevate one group over the other and watch these 2 rascals fight each other. That's what's going on.
Okay, I'm not sure that anything governmental is a gift, though, but hope.
Wow.
I think that when we talk about it, a lot of those programs, especially the ones from back in the day, since we are going to do the history thing, were not just made for Black women, but Black women accessed them because Black women were the ones that were in the household that had to take care of whatever was left when the government did steal our Black men away, or when Black men did fall into the hands of white supremacy. But I also have a question.
What does that mean?
Bunk. This is chick babble. Basically, Black men weren't working as much as they should. They were economically deprived, and basically the government gave them a better deal, and Black women took it. The thing is, they had to give it to Black women because white women are already getting it. So if you're gonna make everything equal, got to give it to Black women too, and they took the deal.
But this is not limited to just policies. This operates on so many levels. I was just talking to a colleague the other day. He's a tenured professor. Full professor. And one of the things we started talking about was him getting a grant to go on sabbatical. And he said, well, first, I've never been on sabbatical. So this cat that means he's gone from from assistant to associate to full professor, and he's never taken a semester off. Sabbatical is a common thing for academics to take time off to write. He said, I've never taken a sabbatical. I said, well, what about, getting grants and taking time off of teaching? He said, I've never done that. I said, I haven't either. But I said, how many of your female colleagues have? And he started laughing. He said, all of them. He said, they share that information amongst each other. But more important than that, he said, I've said this as well. I've written applications for grant support, these kind of things, opportunities to get out of having to teach these, and been denied. And I've even had the very sisters that have gotten them help me with it, and it's still denied. And when I talk to brothers across different fields, it's the same kind of thing. So my point is, Black men have a different relationship to these institutions than Black women, and Black women don't acknowledge it. What they do is turn around and say, well, if you're not doing as well as I am, it's because you're a failure, rather than acknowledging that there's an institutional bias that works in to their advantage. This is what I was saying earlier with Sedanius and the sexual dynamic between white men and Black women. It from slavery onward, it's created a different relationship, a different quality of life where Black women relate to the system differently than Black men. And the only Black women that I find that generally acknowledge that tend to be mothers of sons.
Yeah, and then that's not always a guarantee, a given.
No, it isn't a guarantee. It isn't. But those are the ones I tend to notice. If Black women notice it and acknowledge it, they tend to have boys.
Yeah, well, like they said on Fox Soul, Black women are not Black people.
But you know, the funny thing about all of that is, you know, with the current researcher Curry, which encapsulates the work of Errol Miller and Jim Sedanius and a whole host of other persons, is that, and genocide studies as well. Man, look, the racism, white supremacist system that we've been undergoing for centuries is primarily directed at black men in its most aggressive forms. We have to be aware of that. We have to be knowledgeable about that. But feminism precludes that as a possibility. It doesn't fit into the analytical heuristic of feminism at all. No. Because what they do is intuitively, they just assert that because they're part of these two categories, womanness and blackness, that they're doubly oppressed. That's the intuition that rolls from it.
Right.
But the reality is, if you look at the empirical data and you look at metrics of well-being, you will see who's being most viciously attacked and who has the most deleterious outcomes related to the phenomenon of racism. But they refuse to acknowledge it because they're married to ideology as opposed to being married to the truth. Now, that's just reality to me. Now, people can see it differently. I see it the way I see it. I've studied a lot. I've read a lot. I've researched a lot. And what I've come to the conclusion is that these people don't want to be communicated with. They don't want to miss out on the boons that they receive from following in the footsteps of racist-ass white women. It just is what it is. They get gimmies, goodies, and grab-ems, and they don't want to let them go.
No, they don't want to share it. They don't want to share the wealth. They never have.
And there's a material benefit to choosing ideology over truth. You don't have to be confronted. As long as you stay within the confines of that ideology, you can continue to accept and benefit from material advantage. You know, if you're an academic, if you talk down about black men, your career will open up. If you advocate seriously for black men, at best, you stay paddling in a circle. But this is the reality of what we're dealing with. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. Just came through the chat. Good to see you in here, man. Let's continue.
Question now is, if you don't see that those things are happening, if we're not seeing those things in influx, then what are the greater black male population doing to enforce that these things happen? When women want things, especially when black women want things, we get up, we say something, we talk about it, and we're going to talk about it until we're blue in the face and until we get those things done. A lot of the times what I find is that black men think that they can ride off of those things, and then when things come to pass and they're not put into the game plan, then you're upset. Then it's like, oh, well, we thought we were going to, why? You did none of the work. You sat behind me and you watched me rally and you watched me do all of these things, and then you thought that you were going to benefit from it. And I'm sorry that I left you off, but honestly, when I was doing this work, it was hard to consider you, considering that I have to take care of you regardless in a lot of those spaces. But I also think that hit dogs will holler. If these things do not apply to you, then let's talk about how you help them to apply to the people that they do and pull those brothers out of the struggle instead of trying to defend something that does not apply to you. If it don't apply, let it fly, and let's figure out how to pull everybody into that fold instead of defending a narrative that you don't even conform to. Why are you so upset?
When I always hear, like, when Dwan, when you were talking about the government subsidies that black women have, it always makes me think about the movie Claudine with Diane Carroll and James Earl Jones. And, you know, him being the trash man and having to hide him in the closet when the people came. So I do believe that it definitely was a setup for a letdown in the black community. Dr. Umar?
Yes, indeed. One of the problems with the conversation, not with you, Tammy, but the responses, they're so individualized. Nothing is being evaluated from a group perspective or a community perspective or a systems perspective or an institutional perspective. The bottom line is anything black men want to do to liberate ourselves or our community, we can't do it without our women. And anything our women want to do to liberate themselves or the community, they can't do it without the men. It is not a competition. It should be a collaboration. But once again, some of us in the conversation are so filled with hatred for the opposite gender that we can never get around to talking about solutions. And in speaking of clips, Sister Tammy, there is one clip you might want to ask Sister Cynthia about, because it was sent to me by about 30 people several months ago, maybe even weeks, where she suggested that Black women, should abort their Black male fetuses because after birth, they would not contribute to anything worthwhile in the Black community. Could you ask her to clarify her comments?
I would love to.
Well, I would love to too, but we don't have time. So
all of a sudden, now we don't have time. We ain't got time today.
Yes, indeed. This Saturday will be the second.
Okay. So that they're about to start advertising what they're going to do. So any thoughts about that?
I got to share something real quick. It's already up there for you to share when you decide to share it, Doc.
There you go. Let me.
All right, can you see that? Is that something you can see? Okay, all right, so look, this is what happens when Black men try to do something. Okay, my brother's keeper, my sister's neglector. A critique and explanation of single-sex initiatives for Black boys. Now, a white woman, white trans woman wrote this, okay? And a lot of Black women supported and said, yeah, sister, calling this white trans woman their sister or whatever the case may be. You say it to them, girl. The urgent problems facing Black boys and young men have triggered the proliferation of single-sex initiatives aimed at tackling these obstacles, which you can't deny they're obstacles. Namely, public single-sex schools and programs like President Obama's My Brother's Keeper. Black girls have largely been left out of these initiatives despite facing many of the same barriers as Black boys and disadvantages of their own. Now, first of all, this is a law professor who is writing this shit. So as soon as we try to put something into place, the first thing they do is they explain how it leaves out girls, and girls have more problems. They have the same problems that Black boys have and more. Right. This is always the argument, okay? So the article identifies, critiques, and explains this disproportionate intervention for Black boys. Now, they don't have a problem with interventions for Black women like Goldman Sachs. They don't have any problems with, governments instituting, like the brother said in the video. What do they call it? Incomes, guaranteed income.
Universal basic income.
For Black women. They don't have an issue with that. They don't have a problem with the vast majority of Black women being available to have Section 8, TANF, or WIC, whatever the fuck is out there. But they got a problem as soon as Black boys even suggest, as soon as Black men or any group of men suggest, look, we have unique problems of our own. And doing it your way is not working for us.
Right.
It's not your educational system is not working for us. Your socialization process isn't working for us. Having white women and a bunch of hating ass Black women teach our kids is not helping Black boys develop into the kinds of Black men that they potentially could be. So even Derek Bell was having a conversation during an interview. I think I'm gonna do a show about this very thing right here.
Please do.
Okay, Derek Bell suggested we're so wedded to ideology and identity politics. We are not even exploring alternative courses of action that could ameliorate our condition. We're not even trying to. Right. Like, for example, he talked about single-sex education for Black boys and how people have come out condemning it, even to the point of objecting to it by basically filing lawsuits against men preemptively to prevent such things from happening, because there's no evidence that these boys only initiatives are actually going to work, and that there's really no gender gaps between Black boys and girls large enough to warrant disproportionate intervention. Although we know the failure rate of Black boys in high school is high and in college is high. We know that there are more Black women in universities than there are Black men. We know that there are more Black women in graduate school than there are Black men.
Right.
We already know that black men are suspended more often, expelled more often, sent off to the school to prison pipeline more often. Mm-hmm. But in order to try to intervene, we can't even develop alternative strategies for action because those actions in and of themselves are going to be perceived as exclusionary to black girls or black women. Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they've created a paradigm in which they can look out for themselves, riding on the coattails of feminism, but we can do absolutely nothing but sit on our hands while they do it. And then they declare themselves to be magical while we get hit with lawsuits and get hit with invectives and diatribes for even trying to do what we can to try to mitigate our circumstances. Right. This, to me, puts us in a catch-22. We damned if we do, we damned if we don't. Right. That's not the way we should be working. That's not, and he's correct. And here's the funny thing. This woman just got through talking about, this trans woman, got through talking about how women are engaged in revolutionary action, whereas black men are kind of like bumpkinish and don't have the intellectual resolve or the ability to do anything to even understand how to, ameliorate their condition. They just don't even understand how. They're like dunces. Okay? But here's the reality. If you read the Kerner report, the Kerner Commission, they basically stated, and these are criminologists, like you said, BGS, sociologists. Yep. They said the most intelligent people in the black community were these young black boys who dropped out of high school because they didn't want to have shit to do with the educational system.
Damn. True.
They didn't want to participate in it because they perceived it as antagonistic towards their very being. Wow. And they were the ones out in the street creating the unrest. Mm-hmm. They were the ones out there burning shit down.
Yeah. Right.
And they were the most intelligent, even though they weren't so-called the most traditionally educated.
Right.
And but the problem is you got a bunch of black women, not all of them, but a bunch of black women who are educated, who have adopted the sentimentality and the attitude of Northeastern bourgeois white women and the values that they esteem and that they hold dear.
Yep.
And they're using that value system, this neoliberal, affluent white woman perspective. They're using it against their own men. Mm-hmm. But the reality is black men are still doing well. Mm-hmm. We ain't doing the best, but we're doing well given the circumstances.
In spite of.
Yeah. In spite of the circumstances, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even when you see what happened with Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to shut up and I'm going to be done talking for a while. Even with Black Lives Matter, I saw the shit happening before my eyes, bro, because I am from St. Louis. I saw it happening, bro. Mm-hmm. You had these young black boys in the street, the same demographic that the Kerner Commission talked about, who were tearing shit up in the streets.
Right.
And then guess who comes in as interlopers?
Mm-hmm.
Guess who comes in putting their fucking hashtag out there, soaking up all the fucking airtime on television while all the work was already done. If you want to talk about antagonistic, revolutionary rebelliousness, it was already done when they got there.
Mm-hmm.
Quick Trip was already burned down when their asses got there. All they did was come in and start talking intersectional talking points, bro.
Right.
We need to lead. And the white media allowed them because that's what the white media wants. It wants them to be at the lead. It wants them to have FaceTime. They don't want us to have FaceTime. So I'm done talking for a minute, man. I'm gonna let y'all resume the conversation, bro.
Well, before we do, I got a request. Shout out to Mr. Z, who's in the chat. He gave me a timestamp that he wanted me to play of Cynthia G. So let me go ahead and do that and hear what he wanted to show us.
Well, if anyone really wants to know about why selective breeding will be the best thing for our community, then they can come to my channel where I explain that, as I also talk about the dynamic between Black men and Black women, and Black women's need to have standards, expectations, and boundaries when dealing especially with Black men, but any man in general, and open up your options too. Put you first. Stop thinking about Black men.
Oh yeah. They stated their claim. They're intersectional feminists, and they're no longer part of the Black community. The Black community doesn't include Black men anymore. Basically, that's what they're saying.
But let me ask you a question. Let me ask you. In all of the most intense so-called misogynist work that you've heard from hip hop to the church to the manosphere, when have you ever heard Black men say, "Stop giving birth to Black girls"? When have you ever heard Black men say that we are going to stop reproducing just so we don't have to worry about giving birth or about producing girls? You ever heard that before?
Never.
If this is not an embodiment of internalized racism and hatred for your own, this is why I said earlier, and I didn't want to expound on it then. I know I said I was going to be quiet, but dude,
go ahead.
I don't have to.
if you hate the fruit of your own womb, if it's male, you are a traitor to your race. Bottom line. If you hate, I've never heard a Black man say, "I hate my Black little girl."
Right.
I hate the little girl. I've never seen the shit. Now I can see them being mad at their daughters for doing something that's disrespectful. I've seen that. But in terms of, I wish you was never born. I wish you was born a male.
Right.
I've never seen that, man.
Right.
But even going so far as to say we're going to try to create a condition in which we can't reproduce, it's fucking idiocy. This how you know this. I want to call it a B word, but you know, I'm on Dr. Johnson's channel.
You called her a bubblehead. I said that's pretty close. I call it an airhead, but yeah, that's pretty close.
But the reality is, think about that. The fruit of your own womb you consider to be tainted. Now, white women tried this shit. The most radical of them tried this in the 70s, man. They created these communes and shit like that.
Right.
That's over with. That's done. They abandoned those communes because they realized that women can be assholes and be controlling and dominating just like men. So they decided, okay, well, we're going to move into more traditional family style structure.
Yeah.
I mean, if the mononuclear family is fucked up, what you want to get married for? If the mononuclear family is fucked up, why are you shacking up with one woman and declaring that that's your life partner? If it's fucked up, essentially. Like, I mean, to me, the contradictions within the context of this whole movement are beginning to show. And it's about time that people are critiquing this. Now, I'm not hearing, I know that there are white men who are critiquing it. But in the academy, you'll be remiss to see a whole bunch of white men coming out and saying anything about feminism. Now, you've seen some do it. I've seen Murray Strauss do it.
Right.
I've seen, Dennis
Peterson.
Dutton do it. I've seen a few men. I've seen Jordan Peterson do it.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I haven't seen, because white men know that in the academy, they still rule the roost. And they see like women in gender studies as a tolerance, but it serves a function for them as well. Because it serves as a buffer.
Yeah, it does.
Okay?
Yeah,
so they'll let the women exclude the niggers.
Yeah.
The niggers we don't want around. Now you can keep the soft little black girl around because we want to screw them. But we don't want the niggers around, so ward them off. Now you got black women participating in warding us off.
Yeah, they've been put in as overseers of the black men.
Right. Gatekeepers and overseers.
Gatekeepers and overseers.
And the premise of it all is that we're abusing them. So, or we're being so dominating and patriarchal because of our, we've been socialized to do so, that it's best to keep us away.
When they depend on the exact opposite. We've been socialized not to do that, not to dominate them, and we've been socialized to follow, and they know that. Otherwise, the shaming wouldn't work.
Right.
Well, that shaming is over with for me, man. Like there's a reason why I took 3 courses in feminism, because I wanted to give it an audience. I'm an equal opportunity, learner, exchanger of ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to learn. I want to see what the crux of the matter is.
Right.
And after having perceived it for an extended period of time and seeing the kind of arguments that were being made to some of the things I would say, like one of the first ways I came into contact with you, Dr. Johnson, is on Facebook.
Right.
Now, at the time I was a postdoctoral fellow, and I made a comment, and all of a sudden this white trans woman comes out telling me that I got black male privilege. Now, this is I am a man who had already been to prison.
Right. Speak on it.
I've already had guns pulled on me by police for doing nothing.
Right.
I've had all kind of crazy ass experiences. I've been alienated from one of my children, and the woman used the state as a means by which to dominate and control my relationship with my child, as if part of her DNA is not coursing through a fucking goddamn her body. But you gonna tell me I'm privileged?
Right.
How privileged do you have to be to declare yourself to be a whole nother fucking gender and participate in women's sports and to gain awards and to act like you ain't done shit other than what you're supposed to do because you really are a woman? This is the sort of shit we contending with. That's the first. That's how I came into contact with Dr. Johnson, and Tommy Curry was hitting me up. Dr. Johnson was hitting me up like, wait a minute, hey, bro, now you know, now you see. Because I was like ready to exchange information. I thought that one day we could actually sit down with these people who had these viewpoints and engage in some sort of, some critical dialogue to where we could reach some impasse. I mean, get past the impasse.
Right.
Now I realize there's no way to get past this impasse. Not without being candid. Not with just trying to put the gloves on and to speak softly.
Got to force them to the table. Got to force them out of hiding. And unfortunately, we got to force them out of their bubble, because they're in this bubble, in this echo chamber where they hide. Right. When social media is forcing them out of that bubble. Have an honest conversation about their ideas.
Man, I was so pissed off, man, when that person told me, I'm from the hood, north side St. Louis. I'm from the trap, what they call the trap now. We call it the ghetto when I was coming up.
Yeah.
Every day I had to drive past crackheads who their life prospects aren't moving into the corporate or the academic world. You know that. I have to drive from the north to the south. I have to go past what is called a dividing line. They call it Delmar Boulevard. Go read the Delmar. Go put Delmar Divide in the Google search, and it'll come up. I had to move past that line. And you telling me I'm privileged?
Now, let me add to this real quick about Gigi in particular, because I didn't know him at the time, right? And when he was going through what he was going through, and I'm saying this because I want people to understand, when we get these questions about whether black men operate on each other's behalf, there's often a lot of slighting that goes on. Black men don't do anything. But so Gigi was going through what he was going through. Tommy shot me a message. He said, go get him. Go get him. And he sent me the information. I went there, reached out to Gigi. I didn't know him. Then I reached out to BGS. So we got to get him. We got to help him. This is the Brotherhood Network.
Yes.
Right? This is the Brotherhood Network. As a matter of fact, comedian Ali Sadiq said the same thing happened to him in prison. He said now in that context, there was an age difference. I think Gigi might be a little older than me. but there was an age difference. Some of the elders in the prison saw him, knew that he had something. He had a skill, he had a talent. He just had a light in his eyes. That was the quote he used. And they said, go help him out, go get him. The network of what brothers do for each other is not as brazen as we may see with other groups and other black women in particular. But it doesn't mean it isn't there. Brothers help each other out all the time. It's under the table. Brothers ain't looking for a reward to do it. It is a responsibility, because I know that brother Gigi is fucking brilliant.
He is brilliant, yes.
And there's no way in the world that I'm going to sit there and watch him be flushed down some goddamn toilet when he's got so much going on. No way in the world. Now, I wouldn't let that happen if it was within my power to just an average everyday cat. But there was no way that Gigi was going to happen. And I didn't know that at the time. Tommy was like, go get him. And I knew if he was pointing me to somebody, there was a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put that out there. And just so y'all know, BGS does that all the time. There's a number of people that he's never going to tell you about that only have channels because of his intervention. And I mean intervention.
Mm-hmm.
He's reached out to me and said, this is what's going on. We got to go do this. And I don't even debate it. I'm like, let's do it. There are a number of brothers here that have channels. And for some of those brothers, this is how they fucking eat.
Mm-hmm.
Because the world has pushed them out of every other space. So we do advocate for one another. And I want to urge the brothers listening to this to make it your point to find another brother that's going through it. Because as I was pointing to earlier, many of these institutions that I've spent, look, I got a doctorate. I went through the whole process. I didn't have anywhere near as much support as most of my black female colleagues. They had all kinds of support mechanisms in place. The brother Dewan, I think his name is, what he was talking about earlier in the interview, he was absolutely correct. It's not just limited to entrepreneurship. It's not just limited to welfare. We're finding this same dynamic in so many different places. This is why in 2020, when on the Onyx Report, we were talking about programs for small businesses, for small black businesses, they were overwhelmingly being targeted for women. And I challenged my listeners to find one program that targeted black male entrepreneurs. So far, since 2020, I've not had anyone come forward and show me a program for black males. Then we started to see the cities around the country creating programs to donate resources to black women, black single mothers, not one to black men. Well, there was one in Chicago they were discussing, but to my knowledge, it still hasn't gone through. And there's resistance from the mayor, as I'm told, to prevent it from going through.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen a program yet for black males that's gone through. Right? This is we keep finding the same things happening over and over again. And when black men start to question it, black women are the first ones to say, well, because you're not doing what I can do, the problem must be yours, because we're all black and we all experience racism.
Yeah.
Institutional misandry.
The thing that ticks me off is that these people, your class of people are supposed to be the most educated, most knowledgeable, have the most access to information on the planet, right? And you can't see what's happening right in front of your face. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe it. They're not. These women are not stupid. They're not crazy. They have high IQs. They can. If I can see it, they can see it. They have far more access to information and stats and stuff like that than I do. And I can see it like it's on the tip of my nose. Okay, so tell me they can't see, they can't recognize it. Come on. I refuse to believe it. It's just me.
Hey man, that's why when I first came on air, Dr. Johnson, you were the catalyst for getting me started on YouTube to do anything. And I told you when I first came in, like, dude, I don't really feel comfortable with asking brothers to give me anything, or we're actually, trying to draw funds or, sustenance from any of this. I kind of, I want them brothers to, just listen. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how I first came in. And then, I got accused of being a grifter myself, because I wanted to do a documentary.
Right.
I thought it was the right time to do it.
It was.
But I didn't, I guess I was too new in the space. I was too ambitious, and too idealistic, being the philosopher that I am. I'm like, okay, this idea, we need to move on it. But that's neither here nor there. But
I had the same reservations with BGS, and it took me 6 months before I even asked for the first donation. For the same reasons you had. BGS had to be the one to push it through. He said, you do have a child, right? I said, yeah. He said, your child be going to college soon, right? I said, yeah. He said, hey. It took 6 months, but I had the same reservations, man.
Yeah.
I had reservations. I didn't have reservations about speaking about these issues,
right?
But I did have a reservation of asking men to support me because I know the condition of black men. You know, like in bulk. I can't say all because there's some brothers out here doing it big.
Oh
okay?
yeah.
It just is what it is. There's brothers out here getting it. Okay, but my goal has never been to become a breakout YouTube sensation as much as it's been somebody who's going through the same struggles. This moves across class.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It moves across education.
Yes.
It moves across social economic status is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Mm-hmm. Our issues are endemic to us being black and male. Mm-hmm. And until we begin to help each other out, man, mm-hmm. which they say we need to be responsible for doing. But as soon as you see us coming together, guess what they try to do? It's just like the police seeing a whole bunch of black men gathered together on a corner. They do their best to try to bust it up.
Right.
Now, what I say here is not always nice. Sometimes I yell, I fuss, I cuss. Okay? But the larger point is most of that's rhetorical. But I do it because I'm pissed off like a lot of y'all are pissed off, man.
Right.
I'm mad just like a lot of y'all are mad. I don't want to be tone police just like they don't want to be tone police. I don't want to be stereotyped just like they don't want to be stereotyped.
Right.
But they've had this narrative going for 50 to 60 years. And the evidence is now emerging that the same shit that they're declaring that we're doing is the same shit that they are doing. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's stopping us now is our holding on to the vestiges of chivalry. Mm-hmm. I say fuck chivalry, bro. Mm-hmm. Not because I hate women and I don't want to respect women. I respect anybody, whether they're male or female. I would defer to someone who has the higher rank or has more information in a specific area. I don't care who they are. But don't expect for me to lay down and be totally and obsequious to you by an accident of birth. Fuck that. I'm not about to defer to you because you're a woman. No more than I would defer to a man because he's a man. Mm-hmm. All of this deference talk, you can't have it if you have political equality. You don't get it. It's over with for that.
Yeah.
And then women need to understand that. The very thing that you've asked for is what you're getting. Mm-hmm. This is the logical consequence and conclusion of your movement. To be held accountable just like everybody else is. To get work just like everybody else gets it.
Right.
To be critiqued just like everybody else is being critiqued. Mm-hmm. You can't sidestep it under this veneer of purity and virtuousness anymore. And if we actually engage in the conversations without all of the rhetoric and all of the bubblehead bullshit, because that's coming from Cynthia G, man, that woman don't know what the fuck she talking about, bro. I'm just being honest, man. She don't know what the fuck she's talking about. She's not a serious student of history. And, I mean, she's not even a serious student of ideas. So, and quite frankly, why would Fox Soul bring that woman on TV, man? On her platform, other than it's fun and it'll create drama and get some clicks and some views or some shit like that. No disrespect.
His host was in agreement with her the whole night.
Yeah.
The host was in agreement with her. So they believe the Fox Souls and their crew believe in what Cynthia G is saying. Because they said the same thing literally to Ice Cube about the black political agenda.
Yeah. But that was my problem the whole time. Not only do these platforms equalize people regardless of their background, their study, the research, the amount of work they put in, what they've achieved on the basis of that. Not only does it equalize all of that, but Cynthia operates in a space where it's not even a requirement that she bring something beyond talking out of her ass. And the fact that you know how many brothers were waiting for me to refute the things she said. And that was part of the problem too. It's like the fact that you actually have to go find people to refute it because nobody else is. It's acceptable for her to literally talk shit. about black men, and go so far as to say you should give up black babies, you should avoid black male babies, abort them. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. On one hand, saying we should stay and help them out, and the other hand, they tell black women they could open up their options and go where they want to. Freedom for thee, but not for me. Freedom for me, but not for thee.
Didn't she have a black baby not too long ago?
Yes, she did. 3 years ago.
Is it a boy or a girl? Hopefully it's a girl.
It's a girl. She calls it fuzzball.
Oh, man, thank God, because that little boy would have been in a fucking heap of trouble, boy.
Shout out to Robert Bain for the generous support, the generous contributions. Says late tuition and support. Thank you, gents, for your scholarship. Keep teaching and helping others in need. Shout out to you, brother.
Appreciate you.
But yeah, like when you hear a woman say, a black woman say selective breeding,
right,
that gives you some indication of what the fuck you're dealing with.
Right.
That gives you an indication of the mindset and the norms and the values that individual holds dear. And it's unfortunate. I've never been the one to say that black men can't be in, support of internalized racism. I've never said that. I think it's the case that black men can embody their own inferiority. But goddamn it, so can women. I'm not saying that black men aren't sexist, but goddamn it, so are black women.
Right.
I mean, let's just tell the truth. This is all we want to do is tell the truth. I'm not worried about your relationship or whether you can find a woman to get down with and partner up with. I've never been that individual. I don't care about whether or not, you got easy access to sex. What I care about is justice. I care about the truth related to what's actually going on in the black community. And it's time to put off, it's time to take off the gloves. And it's time for you simp ass dudes, man, to take off them fucking capes. Because actually you're doing these women a disservice by infantilizing them. That's what's happening. You're doing them a disservice when you treat them like they're naive and aloof and don't know what the fuck is actually going on. Like you said, BGS, these women are the most educated in the black community.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
They might not be the most educated in the white community, but goddamn it, they're the most educated in the black community. And what is their education being used in service of? If you got a psychologist that's using terms like selective breeding, even if she got an undergrad degree, that's it. Using words like selective breeding, and not, by class as much as by sex. What type of shit is that, man? This dealing with what we going through is a trip, man. What a hell of a time to be alive. Because I never when I was born in the 70s, I would never have guessed that this is where we would be.
Well, there's always been internalized subcutaneous hatred of black men of black men for a long time, right? It's just coming to the surface now. They have the ability of not needing us, so it's just coming to the surface. It's been there. The internal resentment of black men. Basically, I played clips of where men and women have said this back in the 1960s. There was an internalized resentment and low-key hatred of black men because of what they believed that we allowed to happen to them. So this is not new. The thing is now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I've stopped you in mid-sentence. So sorry about that.
No, I was just going to say. So this is now that we post-industrial and basic feminism is basically taken over. They feel free to say it now. It's the only difference.
So what I was going to say is that black men expected to be able to live a life where they would have a cooperative partner who would work with them to create a legacy.
Right.
That's what I expected when I was young.
Right.
A legacy.
Right.
I expected to do some Jerry Buss type shit. You understand what I mean? And white men go through the grinder too with divorce and shit like that.
Yeah.
It is what it is, because the man was married like how many times? Twice or something like that?
Twice.
Or once?
Yeah.
Twice?
Yeah.
Okay. But he still had involvement and interaction with his children. They were an integral part of his development of his business model.
Right.
We can't even get there. Even if we ain't together, we can't get there. We got to the point where you bring a kid some food, they'll throw the shit on the ground. We're at the point where you got people who say selective breeding. We're at the point now where we can't even communicate with each other without mudslinging. And we didn't start this shit. Black men were not the authors of this divisiveness. It started with white women. Black women adopted it for their own economic gain and their own social status. And now here we are.
And when you look at how many women support this kind of misandry coming out of Cynthia G and others like her, right? I'm not going to say that these individuals are causing these problems by themselves. The question is, how many of these women support this, and how many women ignore it and allow it to go through while chastising men for these ideas about misogyny, right? This kind of stuff is popularized in social media, and it's so acceptable in media. I mean, somebody earlier was commenting on BET. You got TV One. You got channels that support this misandry, and nobody says anything about it. When black men respond to people like Cynthia G, they're also monitoring how many women are opposing her, how many women aren't saying anything, and how many women are supporting her. And that goes with the therapist we saw on Twitter. That goes with anybody that steps up from this black feminist ilk to defy black men.
Yeah, and I think it is what it really I think is why it's somebody like Fox would allow this is that the black manosphere is a problem, a real problem, not just low key on social media, but also politically. Because Stacey Abrams had to step to a men's cigar bar because black men are a problem, right? But the manosphere is a problem. Black manosphere is a problem, even in the local election for mayor in Los Angeles, right? Because the Ice Cube effect. They need to actually listen to the concerns of black men. We don't follow blindly anymore because of the black manosphere. And basically, shout out to the St. Kevin Samuels, our martyr. Okay, this stuff has actually gone not only mainstream but also global. So now the black manosphere is a force to be reckoned with, and in small part to the PhDs that are here, they actually legitimize this space. They can't say anything. So basically, shout out to Dr. Johnson. I told him he would be the first, but he wouldn't be the last. Okay, and he was going to make an impact not only on this space but also in the universities, but also in the political realm. And Gigi's right behind him. Okay, without them, this would not be possible. Okay, but the thing is, this space and these people for black men is going to have to go to the next level. So, like I say, go to Dr. Johnson's 14 points of the black male political agenda. It's now being taken seriously. Trust and believe the politicians are actually looking at their agenda. That's how come it's there. Trust and believe they know, they hear what Gigi's saying about not only about the feminism, but me and Gigi are actually diving into the patriarchy that they claim to be fighting against and what patriarchy really is, because nobody will talk about it. Okay, me and Gigi are the only people who actually talk about this and challenge that notion about the patriarchy, because I don't believe patriarchy actually exists in the United States. And I believe what we're having is a white female gynocracy forming. That's what I believe.
Hey, BGS, that show that you did about the fall of the empire of fatherhood was important to me. And, your tireless efforts, man, because what you do is you present documentation and you read. You don't just do opinion pieces without making references to some sort of source. Okay? And thank you for that. You're an autodidact, and you have my respect to the utmost. But that's important because
I'm humbled.
It's important because, and I've been saying this, but what you brought to the table builds on it. I assume that the Custody of Infants Act was the fall of patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Was the very thing which gave women absolute control over the lives of children and their education and socialization.
Right.
But what you brought to my awareness was the fact that the courts of chancery in England all along were involving themselves into the domestic affairs of men and women and the whole concept of who was going to have control over children. Yeah. And I think that ultimately the state is involved in the business of socializing children so that they can control them.
Yes.
And shape and mold them into the type of citizens that they want them to be.
Right.
Whereas fathers, not good for business.
Yes.
Fathers create the kind of sons that just might buck the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, so what we're dealing with is a system that's doing its best to intervene and to intercede such that men don't have the capacity to challenge the men and the women who are at the top of the tier. That's how I perceive this shit. You got a class of legal professionals and bureaucrats and technocrats who are ministering over the lives of people and preventing men from having meaningful relationships with their children.
Yes.
And this is where we are. And men are right to be resistant against this. They're right to be resistant against a system in which it's assumed that the natural stewards of children are women, because it wasn't always that way. At least in Western culture, it wasn't. The man was the steward of the child.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But within the course of 150 years, 200 years, that's been upended.
Mm-hmm.
So what existed back from Roman times up till now, these women complain about the patriarchy, but they use the state, which is the patriarchy really, and the corporate structures, they use it to leverage their power.
Right. Right.
And it's important that men begin to understand this shit and see it for what it is. And all of it is connected also to racism, in case you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All of it's interconnected. And we're becoming aware of it. And even white men are catching hell. But this is what happens when you allow some sort of fucking sickness to fester within the bowels of your own goddamn country.
Mm-hmm.
The chicken's gonna come home to roost on their asses too. All for the sake of doing what? Not doing what the Kerner report said that ought to be done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What E. Franklin Frazier and them said ought to be done.
Mm-hmm. Clark.
What Martin Luther King Jr. and them said ought to be done.
Mm-hmm. And all the ills that Clark said was going to happen, that infect the black community from the lower classes, or the ills of the lower classes, as he put it, would infect the upper classes, the rest of the classes, and it has. Hip hop is is neutral, but thing is the messages and the ills of the drug trade and all that kind of stuff that affected the upper classes of the whole black community. Clark said it back in the 1960s. Okay, if you didn't put a check on it, if you didn't elevate the men and put them to work, this is going to happen. Yeah, it has. Here we are. Yeah.
Well, look, fellas, I want to thank you both for coming up, especially on short notice. I think I talked to Gigi maybe 10, 15 minutes before the show. Asked him if he wanted to pop on. BGS, I just harassed him in the middle of the show.
You did. You literally did.
You don't get your ass up here. Shout out to these brothers. These are two brothers that I respect. I am very particular about who I call a friend. I regard both of them as friends. They both got a plate waiting on them if they ever come near Fresno. They better know it. Of these brothers. So, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, man.
No, I wasn't. I was just laughing when you said that, man.
I
saw some of that shit you be posting on Facebook and you be making for your son. I'm like, shit, I can eat some of that.
Nike good, man. Nike's good.
It's gonna go down. It is. But Thursday I will be subjecting myself for my fans, for my supporters, for my listeners. This is a sacrifice that I'm making for y'all. I'm going to watch The Woman King on Thursday. I will do a show on it. I have no idea where it's gonna go. I ain't seen it. Nobody has. It ain't coming out so it's coming out Thursday. I'm gonna go watch it. I'll do a show about it. I'm also I don't know if the show that I was on with Judge Joe Brown invited me to come in Friday and talk about it. I don't know if he'll be there or not. She didn't say. But, so I'll be talking about it on there on Friday. So just look at my community tab on YouTube or check Facebook to know when that is.
Just as you mentioned that, look what came across my feed, man, on Twitter.
Oh yeah, so I saw that earlier too. Yep. Yeah.
And the odd thing about this is, before I even start, I will say this, and this is, not necessarily revealing a lot about the plot structure of The Woman King, but just know, I read what Wikipedia had to say about it, and already they have infused an intersectional approach into this movie, because one of the main characters in the movie is going to have reflections, flashbacks of a rape that they underwent.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Here we go.
Now, first of all, you have to know, before even seeing this movie, women wrote it and directed it, but it was white women that wrote and directed it.
Yep.
Ain't that some shit? So now what we're going to get from The Woman King is an understanding about what happened in Africa by white, from the perspective of white women who really are looking to interject their own feminist narratives within the scope and the frame of the story. Exactly. So just understand that from the get-go. Exactly. And they had the actor who's playing the role of the woman who's supposed to be getting raped to look at the testimony of the woman who claimed that she was assaulted by the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. I forget what her name is. I don't know what her name is, but, and also some other woman, they told her to read a memoir of a woman being abused. So you're gonna get that, even as you see them being strong and warrior-like. I guess they got to overcome the demons of the past of being abused in order to do it. So there's a tinge of misandry that will be there. Trust and believe it.
Oh, I already knew that, but good to know another dimension of it. But thank you, brothers. Appreciate y'all coming through, man.
All right, anytime,
I gotta twist your arm to do a show with me this week, Doc.
All right, let's go.
And you're welcome to come, BGS. I'm gonna talk about this black trans thing, man. And
I'm in.
We're gonna do a 2-part series. We're gonna start on Gigi's channel. We're gonna do another part on mine. So we're gonna get into this.
Okay.
But, all right, brother.
It's time. Yeah.
All right.
So peace out, brethren, man.
All right, Doc. Anytime.
Peace and peace, man. Love.
All right. Stay out of trouble, Gigi.
Oh, you know it. You know it.
All right. So shout out to the Green Gorilla. Make sure you support the Green Gorilla channel here on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber, you should be one already. So go to the channel, subscribe, then go back into the archive and look at the various shows that he's done over the last couple of years. The brother's phenomenal, as you saw tonight. So make sure you support him. I shouldn't have to tell you that as far as BGS Ibmore is concerned, but support the BGS Ibmore channel. One of the things you'll notice is that all 3 of our channels are pretty much permanently shadow banned. I'm still trying to get over 30,000 subs. It's been a lock. But the brothers that I know, like Dr. Ronald Neal, Green Gorilla, BGS Ibmore, you'll find these brothers' channels. They're constantly taking away subscribers. This is the thing we're all experiencing. So the numbers tend to stay low. So they require your support, not only monetarily, but in terms of subscriptions, in terms of likes, so on and so forth. Hit the like button on your way out. Shout out to Roger Report. I see you in there, man. Appreciate that support. Gold Professor, what's up? Hope you're well. Yeah, $ Black Gnostic. There it is. $ G with the PhD. It's right there in the live comments. So if you want to support those brothers, please make sure you do so. And I appreciate your support. I'll be seeing y'all this week. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic and selfish and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.